Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. Hidden Mist Villages. People probably hate me by now. If I show up, I'll only cause more trouble. Send Orochimaru instead. He added with a grin. He's excellent at escaping sticky situations, and his silver tongue is perfect for this kind of task. Orochimaru rarely showed his persuasive skills, but when he did, he could convince almost anyone. As for the front lines, wasn't Jiraiya already managing things? He just didn't want to get dragged into the mess. Lazy, as always, Tsunade thought to herself. She had expected this response. Takuya wasn't the type to shoulder extra burdens willingly. You're right, I won't force you. I'll handle the 3rd Hokage. You just keep an eye on Denzo. But don't starve him too much, okay? Give him at least 1 meal every 2 days. Ration pills alone won't cut it. Compared to Takuya, Tsunade considered herself merciful. Denzo was an old man. 1 meal every 2 days was surely enough. You call me ruthless, but you're not much better, Takuya said, giving her a strange look. Women really hold grudges, he thought to himself. Fine. I'll go capture those 2 sneaks. You take care of the rest. With that, Takuya turned to leave, already planning his next move. Chapter 444, The Curse Mark of the Tongue Eradication is Evidence. Takuya waved his hand dismissively, gesturing for Tsunade to wait a moment. He turned back toward Denzo's small courtyard and said to Pakura, keep an eye on that old man. I'll grab the people hiding inside and hand them over to Tsunade. She'll take care of the rest. Understood. Pakura nodded, lazily twirling a kunai in her hand as she followed Takuya into the front hall. Denzo, already looking visibly thinner and weaker, sat with a grim expression. The loss of weight only made his features appear harsher and more menacing. Here to humiliate me again? Denzo sneered coldly. No, no. Takuya smiled faintly. I'm just here to grab some people. Don't worry, someone will bring you food soon. After all, you're not young anymore, and going hungry for too long isn't good. Drinking tea and living off ration pills won't cut it forever. Grab some people? Denzo's heart skipped a beat, and his pupils shrank sharply. How did they find out? He had ensured his men remained hidden in the secret chamber the entire time. They had barely made a sound, eating, drinking, and even relieving themselves quietly to avoid detection. How could they have been discovered? Seeing Denzo's stunned expression, Takuya smiled smugly. He was thoroughly satisfied with the reaction. I've always prided myself on my exceptional sensory abilities, he said casually. I noticed people hiding in your secret chamber on the very first day. Sorry for letting you hide them for so long. This damn brat. Veins bulged on Denzo's forehead as he clenched his fists tightly. He wanted nothing more than to leap forward and throttle Takuya. The realization that this little devil had known about his subordinates all along, only to toy with him, made his blood boil. Thinking back to the humiliation he'd suffered in recent days because of these hidden men, Denzo's eyes burned with fury. Oh, and one more thing, Takuya added with a smirk. Keep your experiments hidden better next time. If I find anything shady, you'll really be done for. I don't know what you're talking about. Denzo barked, nearly jumping out of his seat. Pakura, standing nearby, narrowed her eyes and watched him closely. 2 glowing fireballs floated silently around her, ready to strike at the first sign of trouble. For Pakura, the mission was simple: follow Takuya's orders, and don't take the fall for anyone. Whether it was Denzo or even the 3rd Hokage himself, she would act as commanded. Pakura understood the rules of survival well. She was under Takuya's protection, and betraying his trust meant losing everything. As long as she remained loyal, even if the higher-ups in Hidden Leaf Village resented her, she could live peacefully. Denzo, seemingly aware of his vulnerable state and the futility of resistance, grunted coldly and fell silent. He feigned ignorance, pretending not to understand what Takuya meant. His hidden men had already been discovered. It no longer mattered. Another offense wouldn't make much of a difference. Denzo comforted himself with the knowledge that the 3rd Hokage would never take things too far. No matter what Tsunoda did, the actual authority still rested with Hiruzen and Sarutobi. Takuya, unfazed by Denzo's theatrics, walked toward the entrance of the secret chamber. Inside, the two hidden subordinates had sensed the danger and quietly moved toward the entrance, as though preparing for an escape. But Takuya didn't bother with subtlety. He simply raised his fist and slammed it into the wall. Boom! The entire house shook violently. A loud crash echoed as large sections of the wall collapsed, burying Denzo's two subordinates under the rubble. Their muffled screams rang out briefly before silence fell. The sheer force of the blow, amplified by Takuya's monstrous strength and chakra control, was enough to incapacitate the men instantly. Denzo glared at Takuya with hatred, his expression venomous. Pakura, on the other hand, stood there, momentarily stunned. Without sparing Denzo another glance, Takuya walked over and pulled the two men out from the rubble. Like helpless chicks, they offered no resistance as he grabbed them by the collar and knocked them out cold. Tilting one man's head back, Takuya pried open his mouth and inspected his tongue. Satisfied, he let the man drop unceremoniously to the floor. Well, Takuya said, clicking his tongue. You're really thorough, Denzo. Every subordinate of yours carries the curse mark of the tongue eradication, so afraid of your secrets being revealed. Too bad for you, this mark can also serve as evidence against you. Humphrey. Denzo turned his back to them, letting out a low snort. He knew that arguing was pointless at this stage. As long as the third Hokage refrained from drastic action, he could endure. Takuya didn't linger. After dusting off his hands, he turned to Pakura. Pakura, tie them up and take them away. Tsunoda will handle the rest. Yes. Pakura dispersed her floating fireballs, tied up the unconscious men, and began dragging them out of the house. As they stepped outside, a group of Anbu operatives arrived. One of them carried a box of food in his hands. Yawning, Takuya waved his hand lazily. Clean up inside and leave the food on the table. You know what you're allowed to do and what you aren't, right? The Anbu members straightened up nervously. The village had already undergone a major purge, but there were always those who might secretly follow Denzo. Takuya's warning ensured no one stepped out of line. Understood, sir. We won't overstep our bounds. One of the Anbu replied immediately. Good. Get to work. The Anbu nodded and entered the house, placing the food on the table before beginning repairs. The damage was significant, 2 collapsed walls and a shattered secret chamber. Fixing the house was far more tedious than sealing up the hidden room, which could be done with a simple earth-style jutsu. In less than 2 hours, the repairs were complete. The Anbu also took Denzo's bound subordinates with them as they left, delivering the prisoners directly to Tsunoda. Tsunoda, wasting no time, dragged the captured men to the Hokage office and unceremoniously dropped them in front of the third Hokage. Hiruzen Sarutobi blinked in surprise at the 2 Anbu-clad prisoners. What's going on? After a brief explanation, his face darkened, unable to hide his frustration. How had Denzo still managed to hide people after all the purges? The evidence was undeniable. The curse mark of the tongue eradication on the prisoners' tongues made it clear who they belonged to. At this point, there was no denying Denzo's guilt. Takuya didn't ask about Denzo's final punishment, and Tsunoda didn't tell him. However, the faint smirk on Tsunoda's face said it all. Hiruzen had been forced to make significant concessions. Whatever the exact outcome, one thing was certain, Denzo's life would only grow more miserable from now on. Takuya didn't care to know the details. The process was irrelevant. He could already picture Tsunoda stubbornly pressing the issue, Hiruzen hesitating to take action, and the resulting compromise to keep the matter quiet. In the end, Hiruzen must have caved under pressure to prevent the situation from escalating further. Chapter 445, Kakashi, remember this, your teacher's strength is terrifying. Tsunoda reaped some benefits, but Denzo remained the same. He faced no punishment. The only change was that the surveillance over him was now openly acknowledged rather than carried out in secret, a compromise silently approved by the third Hokage. But for the third Hokage, this was a considerable loss. Backing down meant sacrificing something. It had to be said, Hiruzen Sarutobi's loyalty to Denzo was almost unfathomable. Takuya couldn't help but suspect whether there was something unspeakable between the two men. If not, why would the third Hokage sacrifice so much for Denzo? When it came to his own family, Hiruzen had never made such significant concessions. Yet, for Denzo, it was different. Is this what they call bonds? Takuya shook his head. Maybe he didn't read enough books to fully understand this mysterious concept of bonds. First it was Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha. Then Hiruzen Sarutobi and Denzo Shimura. Later, it's Naruto and Sasuke. Pair after pair. Sensei, are you looking for something? Kakashi, who had been training under Minato for some time, couldn't help but notice that Minato would often wander off after giving him advice, as if searching for something. Minato froze for a moment, then rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Was it that obvious? He had tried to cover his tracks, but it seemed he underestimated Kakashi's observational skills. Very obvious. Kakashi nodded seriously. If their relationship weren't still formal, he would have asked about it long ago. Minato sighed in resignation, smiling as he spoke. It seems I underestimated your perception. You truly are the village's acknowledged genius, Kakashi. Kakashi tilted his head slightly, his gaze drifting upward. He remained indifferent to the compliment. In the past, he would have been delighted by such praise. But ever since his father introduced him to Takuya, Kakashi no longer thought of himself as a genius. Compared to people like Takuya and Minato, he realized how much he still lacked. Praise meant little to him now. What he really sought was Takuya's recognition. This brat. Though Kakashi had merely tilted his head, the slight upward glance gave off the impression of someone rolling their eyes. Minato couldn't help but recall Takuya's words, geniuses always have a certain edge to them. Kakashi was no different. But using those dead fish eyes on someone wasn't exactly polite behavior. If Kakashi knew what Minato was thinking, he'd protest loudly. He had no intention of being rude, looking up was just a habit. Oh well. Since Kakashi had noticed, Minato decided there was no harm in explaining. He trusted Kakashi to keep quiet. Minato sat cross-legged on the ground and gestured for Kakashi to do the same. Once Kakashi was seated, Minato rested his chin in his hand, his expression slightly conflicted. How should I put this? Your teacher asked me to train you while he handles a particular mission. At the same time, he gave me a somewhat special task, to look for something. Minato paused, then added, since you've already noticed, there's no point in hiding it. Just don't go blabbing about it, alright? What are you looking for? Kakashi asked curiously. Minato grinned. Not telling. Kakashi was dumbfounded. What do you mean, not telling? Ha ha ha. Minato burst into laughter, clearly satisfied with Kakashi's confused expression. Honestly, I don't know what your teacher is looking for either. Minato admitted. If you're that curious, go ask him yourself. But I can't guarantee he won't beat you for asking. Minato shot Kakashi a teasing look, raising his brows as if to encourage him to try it. My teacher is a devil, and now you're devil too. Kakashi's lips twitched as he stared silently at Minato. At first, Kakashi had admired Minato for his sunny demeanor and approachable nature. But as time passed, he began to realize the truth. This smiling, good-natured golden flash could be a little mischievous. Beneath that charming exterior was a man with a wicked sense of humor. Seeing Kakashi's signature deadpan gaze again, Minato sighed, rubbing his forehead. Don't look at your teacher like that, either. Minato advised. Otherwise, he might beat you senseless. You don't need to know everything, and curiosity won't get you far here. Takuya had given Kakashi the same warning before. Don't ask questions about things you shouldn't know. Don't pry into matters that don't concern you. If you do, I'll beat you myself, and your father will thank me for it. Suppressing his curiosity, Kakashi shifted topics. Sensei, your reflexes. Over the course of his training, Minato would often spar with Kakashi, and every session left Kakashi completely overwhelmed. Though Kakashi recovered quickly from each defeat, he still couldn't comprehend how Minato moved so fast. Against Takuya, Kakashi had been outclassed in every possible way. Against Pikura, he got beaten daily. And now, against Minato, he couldn't even keep up with that man's counterattacks. Minato smirked, clearly amused. I was wondering how long you'd hold out. Finally, you cracked. Clapping his hands together, Minato stretched his wrists and held them up in front of Kakashi. My reflexes are unusually strong, faster than your teacher's, in fact. It's one of the few areas where I have an edge over him. Or maybe the only area. As he said this, Minato felt a pang of frustration. Apart from his exceptional reflexes, Minato couldn't think of any other advantage he held over Takuya. As for the flying rage and technique, it's just a jutsu. There's nothing worth comparing. Is that so? Kakashi's mind wandered back to memories of Takuya training him. Minato continued, because of my reflexes, my counterattacks are exceptionally fast. Once I mastered the flying rage and my overall strength improved significantly. That's why your teacher entrusted you to me. He wants me to help you improve your reaction speed. I see. Kakashi finally understood why Takuya had left him with Minato. It was to compensate for his weaknesses. Sensei, how does your strength compare to my teacher's? Can we not talk about that? Minato's handsome face darkened as he smacked Kakashi lightly on the head. Why do you have to bring that up? I said my strength improved, not that I could beat your teacher. Minato grumbled. Kakashi said nothing, simply staring at Minato silently. Minato sighed in defeat, raising his hands in surrender. Fine. I can't beat him. Even with the flying rage and my title as the Yellow Flash, your teacher is a monster. Don't even try to compare yourself to him, you'll just end up frustrated. Minato paused, then added, not even my teacher or the others dare to anger Takuya. Tsunade is the exception, but that's because their relationship is unique. He chuckled, recalling the times Jiraiya had tried teasing Takuya, only to flee the moment Takuya's expression soured. Ruffling Kakashi's hair, Minato sighed. The village has many strong shinobi. Your father, for example, is regarded as one of Hidden Leaf Village's top-tier warriors. But what outsiders don't know is that Takuya is the truly terrifying one. And aside from him, there's Kushina, too. Chapter 446, Yagura secretly arrives in Hidden Leaf Village. You just need to. Mid-sentence, Minato abruptly froze, his sharp senses picking up something unusual. His bright blue eyes scanned the surroundings as two specially marked kunai appeared in his hands in a flash. Kakashi, stay here. Minato instructed in a calm yet firm voice. Don't run around, and don't panic. Something was happening. Kakashi obediently rooted himself in place, though his posture turned rigid with alertness. He nervously scanned the forest around them, but his current abilities weren't sharp enough to perceive what Minato had. Minato's expression darkened slightly as he called out, his voice ringing clear through the trees, this isn't a place you're meant to be. If you're here to launch a surprise attack, I'm afraid you'll be sorely disappointed. The thick canopy of leaves rustled faintly, and from the shadows, several figures emerged into view. The person at the front was noticeably short, about Kakashi's height, and at first glance appeared to be just a child. Yet the air around him was anything but innocent. Impressive, said the voice of the figure, a faint hint of admiration seeping through. No wonder they call you the Yellow Flash of the ninja world. Hidden Leaf Village truly is the cradle of genius talent. As the group stepped further into the sunlight, Kakashi's breath caught in his throat. This is... Minato narrowed his eyes, his brow furrowing slightly. It's just a meaningless title. Minato replied, his voice calm and unruffled, though his body remained poised to move at any moment. Compared to you, Yagura, I'm hardly worth mentioning. Perhaps. Yagura replied softly, shaking his head. Minato didn't lower his guard. I'll ask you to state your purpose. You've come a long way to get here. Though Minato maintained a composed exterior, his mind was already calculating several plans. If things turned hostile, he would prioritize Kakashi's safety and retreat immediately. If it were just him, he wouldn't hesitate to test Yagura and his group in combat, but protecting Kakashi was non-negotiable. The location wasn't far from Hidden Leaf Village, meaning Minato could take Kakashi back to safety, regroup, and return with reinforcements, or with Takuya. After all, Takuya arriving on the scene would render even a group of elites from Hidden Mist Village insignificant. Minato's mind worked quickly, sizing up the unexpected visitors. Yagura, the infamous fourth Mizukage of Hidden Mist Village, wasn't someone who should appear this close to Hidden Leaf Village without reason. Yet here he was, accompanied by a few Jonin-level Mist Shinobi. If this were a sneak attack, it was far too small of a force, almost laughably so. Unless Yagura had lost his mind, Minato thought dryly. Don't misunderstand. Yagura said, raising a hand in a clear signal of peace. His voice remained calm and sincere. We mean no harm, nor have we come here to fight. Then why are you here? Minato pressed, though he didn't lower his kunai. Certain sensitive matters have brought us here. Yagura explained carefully. I need to speak with your Hokage or whoever currently makes the decisions in Hidden Leaf Village. The situation is too delicate for us to approach openly, so we chose this route to avoid detection. I hope you can understand. Delicate matters? Minato's expression remained unreadable as he pondered the situation. Finally, he shook his head. This isn't something I can decide on my own. He said. If you truly mean no harm, stay here. I'll inform the appropriate people. In the meantime, I'll ask that you and your men remain calm and do nothing to provoke suspicion. If you make any sudden moves, I can't guarantee you'll leave this forest alive. Minato's words weren't a threat, they were a statement of fact. Yagura nodded in understanding and signaled his men to sit down with him. Their movements were controlled and deliberate, a clear show of restraint. We'll wait here. Please convey my message. Satisfied, Minato gave a quick nod. Stay put, he said once more before grabbing Kakashi's arm. In a flash, Minato teleported them both back to Hidden Leaf Village. The moment they landed, Minato turned to Kakashi. Go home. Don't tell anyone about what you saw today. Kakashi nodded and departed without a word, though his mind buzzed with curiosity. Minato didn't waste a moment. He teleported directly to where Takuya was. Takuya, meanwhile, was lounging in his courtyard, savoring a chilled watermelon under the afternoon sun. It was rare to enjoy simple pleasures during wartime, and he planned to make the most of it. Just as he bit into another piece, Minato materialized in front of him. Startled, Takuya almost flung the watermelon like a weapon, but recognizing Minato's chakra at the last moment, he restrained himself. What the hell? No time to explain. Minato barked, already grabbing Takuya's arm. It's important, and I can't make the decision alone. Before Takuya could protest, Minato teleported them both away. Takuya's courtyard was left with nothing but the faint smell of watermelon. Nearby, Bakura glanced over briefly before returning her attention to a one-man shogi game, where Denzo sat hunched, brooding as he played alone. In the forest, Takuya found himself standing beside Minato, still holding his half-eaten watermelon. Across from him sat Yagura and his entourage of mist jonin, their eyes immediately locking onto the newcomer. Takuya looked at Minato, then at Yagura. This is the important matter? He asked, blinking. To his credit, Minato simply turned his head, suppressing a grin. Meanwhile, Yagura and his men stared at Takuya with awkward expressions, clearly unsure how to interpret the man who'd shown up mid-snack. Takuya raised the watermelon. You guys want some? Yagura coughed awkwardly. Thank you, but no. Suit yourselves. Unbothered, Takuya shrugged and resumed eating. Waste not, want not, especially during wartime, when something like watermelon was practically a luxury. Once he'd finished, Takuya wiped his hands clean with a handkerchief Kushina had given him. The watermelon rind? He tossed it aside without hesitation. The handkerchief? That was sacred, no way was he tossing that out. So? He finally said, fixing Yagura with a sharp look. Care to explain what you're doing here? Don't tell me losing your command left you so bored that you decided to vacation in the land of fire. Yagura's face twitched. We're here on matters that concern both our villages. If you're not the one in charge, then I request an audience with your Hokage. How do you know I can't make the call? Takuya shot back. Yagura let out a small sigh of frustration. He dearly wished he could just march into Hidden Leaf Village and speak with the third Hokage directly, but doing so would only escalate tensions. Finally, after repeatedly reassuring Takuya of their peaceful intentions, Yagura signaled his men to remain calm and stepped forward slightly. Both our villages have no reason to continue this meaningless war. Yagura said, his tone sincere. Hidden Mist Village's people are just as weary of this conflict as yours. Yet the war drags on. Takuya snorted, cutting him off. Skip the speech. Your village started this war. Besides, it's not like anyone will forget about the Mizukage running out of a bathroom with his pants down. Yagura visibly winced, clenching his fists. Can we please stop bringing that up? Even if he were here to undermine a third Mizukage, Yagura had no desire to hear that embarrassing incident described again. Chapter 447, This kind of mission is off limits for both of us. Is this conversation even going anywhere? Yagura's face turned red with frustration, his neck bulging slightly from the strain. Combined with his boyish features, his expression could almost make one want to say, little brother, don't stress yourself too much. You'll hurt yourself if you're not careful. Despite his youthful appearance, Yagura was actually around the same age as the legendary Sannin and, in some aspects, even more accomplished. After all, while the Sannin were still single, Yagura already had kids who were nearly 10 years old. In this alone, Yagura had left the Sannin far behind. If you keep talking like this, you won't have any friends. Minato looked helplessly at Takuya, lightly nudging him as a reminder to stop spouting nonsense. They were supposed to be discussing serious matters. Fine, I won't mock you guys anymore. No point in driving people away. Shrugging, Takuya said, alright, let's put the past behind us. Since you, Yagura, took the huge risk of sneaking into Hidden Leaf Village, you must have something really important to say. So go ahead. If you can convince me, I'll take you to meet Lord Hokage. If Yagura couldn't even convince him, then he might as well go back where he came from. No, wait. Go back? What nonsense. Hidden Leaf Village and the Mist Village were at war. Yagura had walked right into their hands. Did he really think he could leave? Dream on. Since he'd come this far, he might as well stay and be Hidden Leaf Village's guest. Gotcha. Seeing Takuya's amused smirk, Yagura's youthful face darkened. He could tell exactly what Takuya was thinking. They wanted to detain him and keep him in Hidden Leaf Village. While Yagura remained relatively composed, his guards weren't as calm. Their wary gazes locked onto Takuya, prepared to fight at a moment's notice. If Takuya and Minato attacked, the guards were ready to risk their lives to protect Yagura and get him out. Nothing is ever simple, is it? Exhaling heavily, Yagura rubbed his temples, already feeling a headache coming on. With a resigned tone, he explained, this war came out of nowhere. However, the Mizukage was determined to wage it, and no one in the village dared to oppose him. But as the war went on, we started noticing strange behavior from the Mizukage. You should have realized it sooner. Takuya interrupted impatiently. An elderly man on the brink of death suddenly makes a miraculous recovery. That's suspicious enough. Yagura was briefly at a loss for words. Takuya was blunt, but he wasn't wrong. When the third Mizukage had awakened and recovered, the entire Mist Village had been overjoyed. No one had stopped to question it. Everyone had simply assumed that divine intervention was at play, that their village was being blessed by the heavens. Who cared about the details? Even those who had doubts wouldn't dare voice them. After all, the third Mizukage was the founder of the Mist Village's infamous Blood Mist regime. To suspect he was being controlled or replaced was tantamount to courting death. Looking back now, everything seemed suspicious. Yagura shook his head. There's no point dwelling on it. What's done is done. I came here today because of this matter. Meeting Takuya and Minato's gazes head-on, Yagura bit his lip and said, I suspect that the Mizukage has been controlled, or possibly replaced. Now you suspect it? Isn't that a bit late? Takuya didn't know how to respond. Mist ninjas had a remarkable tolerance for strange behavior. If this had happened in Hidden Leaf Village, someone would have sounded the alarm long ago. Who would let things spiral so far out of control, much less gamble their village's future on a pointless war? No way. Minato's eyes widened in disbelief. Unlike Takuya, he wasn't privy to the underlying details. Hearing Yagura's claim that the third Mizukage was potentially being controlled left him stunned. This was shaping up to be a major event. So, what does the Mist Village's Mizukage being controlled or replaced have to do with Hidden Leaf Village? Why are you here, Yagura? You'd better explain yourself quickly. Otherwise, I'll have no choice but to invite you to stay as our guest. After all, Hidden Leaf Village's prison still has plenty of room. Here comes the real deal. Yagura knew that if he couldn't convince Takuya, meeting the third Hokage would be out of the question. Heck, he'd be lucky to leave Hidden Leaf Village alive. Just Takuya alone was terrifying enough. Add Minato, the yellow flash, and Yagura doubted he could escape unscathed. Grinding his teeth, Yagura finally said, I want to meet your Hokage. I propose an alliance to investigate this matter together. Once the truth comes to light, I believe the war between our villages can end. Surely Hidden Leaf Village has no interest in prolonging a meaningless conflict. The Mist Village was fighting desperately, and Hidden Leaf Village had no choice but to match their efforts. A prolonged war would benefit neither side. Even if one village achieved victory, it would be a hollow, Pyrrhic victory. As for reparations? Forget it. The Mist Village wasn't any richer than the Sand Village. The ultimate result would be two villages drained of resources and with nothing to show for it. What now? Should they take Yagura back to the village? Minato turned to Takuya. From his perspective, ending the war with the Mist Village would benefit Hidden Leaf Village immensely. However, investigating the third Mizukage would undoubtedly complicate matters. This is just. Minato's expression grew serious as he pondered the situation. To everyone's surprise, Takuya suddenly burst out laughing. Brother, this isn't the time for jokes. Minato was dumbfounded. He couldn't understand why Takuya was laughing. Did he find Yagura's proposal ridiculous? Was it? It didn't seem like it to Minato. What's the meaning of this? By all rights, Takuya should have been weighing Yagura's words carefully, not laughing. To Yagura, the laughter felt mocking, like a direct insult to him and the Mist Village. His face darkened, his gaze fixed on Takuya with a sharp intensity. Apologies, that wasn't my intention. Takuya rubbed his face, trying to suppress his laughter. I laughed because you big shots always seem to have an uncanny sense of timing. Even strange events like this align perfectly. What? Yagura was momentarily stunned, unable to grasp Takuya's meaning. Takuya clarified, not long ago, Lady Chio of the Sand Village brought reinforcements to aid Hidden Leaf Village. Upon arriving at the front lines and sharing intelligence with Orochimaru and Jiraiya, she began suspecting your Mizukage was being controlled. She even sent word back to her village to investigate. And as luck would have it, our Hokage had the same suspicions. He wanted me to take on this mission, ideally meeting you or even Genji to discuss the matter. But I turned it down. And here you are, Yagura, showing up in Hidden Leaf Village. Isn't that a bit too coincidental? Quite the coincidence indeed. Realizing it was a misunderstanding, Yagura felt a bit embarrassed. Even his guards, who had been treating Takuya like a mortal enemy moments earlier, gradually lowered their hostility. After all, it wasn't mockery, it was just the absurdity of the situation that had amused Takuya. So that's what it was. Minato sighed in relief, thinking he had misread Takuya's laughter as something malicious. Then why did you refuse the mission? Isn't it obvious? Takuya rolled his eyes at Minato. This kind of mission is off limits for both of us. Why? Minato asked, puzzled. Chapter 448, Choza Akimaki steps on a minefield. At first meeting, Takuya couldn't help but laugh in exasperation, his irritation bubbling beneath the surface. He felt a strong urge to kick someone across the room. "What do you think?" he began. "You and I nearly blew Hidden Mist Village to pieces. The people there hate us with a passion. What do you think will happen if we just waltz into the village? Best case scenario, they don't accuse us of an assassination attempt. Do you seriously think they'd sit down and have a calm, rational conversation with us? Do you think that's even remotely possible?" Bakura. The group of bodyguards. They all had to admit, Takuya had a point. Given his history with Hidden Mist Village, even if they managed to meet with Yagura, the Mizukage would undoubtedly suspect Takuya of being there to cause trouble, perhaps even to assassinate someone. As for discussing a potential alliance? Not a chance. Cough, cough. Yagura cleared his throat, awkwardly scratching his nose. He wisely chose not to respond. Some things were better left unsaid. Minato, standing nearby, mimed zipping his lips shut, signaling that he would say no more on the matter. Enough with the mime act. Takuya snapped, giving Minato a light shove. "Go notify Tsunade. I'll bring Yagura and the others back to the village myself." "Got it." Minato disappeared in a flash, heading off to deliver the message to Tsunade. As for why he didn't go to the third Hokage instead, the reason was simple: neither he nor Nawaki had much fondness for the aging leader. Both preferred to avoid the man whenever possible, lest their inner thoughts slip out and make things awkward. Going to Tsunade was the more practical choice. Activating the Flying Thunder God Jutsu, Minato vanished into the forest, reappearing moments later in Hidden Leaf Village. He made a beeline for the Hokage's office. The Anbu guards at the door recognized Minato and didn't stop him. Knocking politely, Minato waited. "Come in," came the third Hokage's voice. Opening the door, Minato stepped inside. However, upon realizing Tsunade wasn't present, a flicker of disappointment crossed his face. The third Hokage looked up from his paperwork with a warm smile. "Minato, is there something you need from me?" "Apologies, Hokage-sama," Minato said, scratching the back of his head sheepishly. "Takuya asked me to inform Tsunade of an important matter, but you can report to me." The third Hokage began instinctively but stopped short when he noticed Minato's hesitant expression and the way he specifically mentioned Takuya's name. Cough, cough. "Tsunade is at the logistics division. You can find her there." "Understood, Hokage-sama." Relieved, Minato quickly excused himself, making sure to close the door behind him. As Minato left, the third Hokage put down his documents, leaning back in his chair with a heavy sigh. There was a time when Minato had been one of his most devoted admirers, looking up to him with unshakable reverence. Now, the younger man could barely stand to be in the same room. Was I truly in the wrong? Minato, oblivious to the third Hokage's inner turmoil, headed straight for the logistics division. Upon finding Tsunade, he explained the situation with Yagura. Tsunade was taken aback. Hidden Leaf Village had been planning to send someone to investigate the third Mizukage, yet here Yagura was, walking straight into their hands. No wonder Takuya couldn't keep a straight face during the conversation, Tsunade thought. Yagura must have misinterpreted Takuya's laughter as mockery, thinking he was ridiculing Hidden Mist Village. "That brat," Tsunade muttered, shaking her head with a mix of exasperation and amusement. "I'll handle this. Tell Takuya to bring them directly to the conference room at the Hokage's office," she instructed. This situation called for a formal meeting with key individuals. After Minato left, Tsunade sent Anbu operatives to summon Kakashi Hatake, Nara Shikashige, who had recently come out of retirement, and even Choza Akimaki, who had been living a quiet life. This was shaping up to be a high-level meeting. Everyone who still held influence, except for the now disgraced Denzo, was expected to attend. Those notified by the Anbu, even if perplexed, immediately dropped what they were doing and made their way to the Hokage's office. Even the supposedly retired Nara Shikashige and Choza Akimaki complied without hesitation. As they walked to the meeting, the burly, bearded Choza grumbled, "Shikashige, what's this all about? Why is Tsunade summoning us old-timers for a high-level meeting? We're supposed to be retired." "You're one to talk," Shikashige thought, rolling his eyes. "I barely had time to settle in after being dragged out of retirement, and here we are again. Maybe I'm just destined to work until I drop dead," he muttered. "High-level meetings mean something big is happening," Shikashige finally said aloud. "Big or not, why involve me? I'm not even in charge anymore," Choza grumbled. Shikashige sighed and chose to ignore him. Among their old group, Choza had always been the most carefree. Despite his strength and high rank, he had retired early, dedicating his days to culinary experiments rather than politics. Unlike Jiraiya, who pursued research of a different sort, Choza's retreat from the public eye was largely for the sake of his clan. When they arrived at the conference room, most of the attendees were already seated. The third Hokage, Tsunade, the elders Koharu Utatane and Hamura Mitakato, and Kakashi Hatake were all present. Long time no see, Sakamo. Choza greeted warmly, slapping Sakamo on the back as he sat beside him. Completely ignoring the room's tense atmosphere, Choza chuckled, I hear your son's quite the prodigy. By the way, don't take Hiruzen too seriously. He can be a bit indecisive at times, but you shouldn't hold it against him. And make sure to support Tsunade, she's carrying a heavy burden. The third Hokage. Did he really just say that in front of me? Though Choza's words were intended to smooth over the strained relationship between Sakamo and the third Hokage, they still stung. By the way, where's Denzo? Choza asked, changing the subject when Sakamo responded with a polite smile but said nothing. This is not the time for small talk, Choza. Tsunade snapped, slamming her hands on the table. If you're here to reminisce, leave. This is a critical matter, and Denzo has no place in it. You know full well why he's not here. Choza chuckled nervously, scratching his head. Alright. No need to get worked up. I was just curious. He's still a walking minefield, Tsunade thought, glaring at Choza. As much as she appreciated his casual demeanor, there was no denying that handling him, or any of his generation, was no small feat. Chapter 449, finally, someone who can handle that big guy Hiruzen. What's the purpose of calling us all together today? Sensing the tense atmosphere growing heavier by the moment, Hamura Mitakato deftly changed the subject. If Choza Akimeki and Tsunade kept bickering, the situation would only worsen. Troublesome, Nara Shikashige thought. With his eyes half closed and his demeanor calm, he adopted the policy of staying silent unless absolutely necessary. As for Choza Akimeki's attempts to mediate, Shikashige had no intention of intervening. There's something of importance to discuss. The third Hokage said enigmatically. The person in question will arrive shortly. Please be patient. Taking his cue, everyone settled into their seats. Some sipped tea, others exchanged quiet words. Choza, undeterred, leaned toward Kakashi Hatake, speaking in hushed tones, while Sakamo responded with a strained smile and resigned nods. Moments later, the doors to the conference room opened. Takeya and Minato entered, leading Yagura into the room. Yagura's guards, however, were denied entry. Yagura? What's he doing in Hidden Leaf Village? Is this emergency meeting about him? Except for the third Hokage and Tsunade, the others present reacted with visible surprise. Having delivered Yagura, Takeya gave Minato a meaningful glance and prepared to leave. You two stay as well, Tsunade said, gesturing for them to take a seat. Are we even supposed to be part of this kind of meeting? While Takeya appeared nonchalant, Minato stiffened, his nervousness evident. Just sit down, Takeya thought. If I'm not worried, what are you afraid of? Since Tsunade had invited them to stay, Takeya saw no reason to refuse. He was, however, wary of Choza Akimeki, whose eyes had been following him ever since he entered the room, brimming with a disconcerting friendliness. That guy's definitely up to something, Takeya mused. Once everyone was seated, the third Hokage spoke. Yagura, since you've come to Hidden Leaf Village of your own accord, perhaps you could share your intentions. Rest assured, we take your arrival very seriously. No kidding. Yagura himself felt a bit overwhelmed. All of Hidden Leaf Village's top brass were gathered in one room. If this wasn't serious, what was? Everyone. Yagura began, standing up. He repeated the story he had shared with Takeya, centering on his suspicions that the third Mizukage was under someone's control and his hope for Hidden Leaf Village's cooperation in investigating the matter. What? The third Mizukage is being controlled? Although Orochimaru and others had speculated about this before, the third Hokage had kept it under wraps, considering the matter too sensitive. Revealing such a possibility could cause mass panic. However, with Yagura himself seeking aid, there was no longer any point in keeping secrets, at least not from Hidden Leaf Village's leadership. Tsunade had therefore wasted no time organizing this high-level meeting. The revelation left everyone in the room stunned. While it was still just a suspicion, it wasn't baseless. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Yagura wouldn't have come all the way to Hidden Leaf Village if he didn't have some level of evidence. How boring, Takeya thought. These kinds of meetings never held his interest. He had a hunch Tsunade wanted him and Minato to stay so she could cultivate her own trusted circle, ensuring she wasn't overly reliant on the third Hokage's old allies when she ascended to the position of fourth Hokage. The third Hokage's team could be used but never truly trusted. If not for Nawaki's unreliability and the need to avoid accusations of favoritism, Tsunade might have included her younger brother in this meeting as well. Bored already? While others were still processing the shocking news, Choza Akimeki, smiling jovially, scooted his chair closer to Takuya. Unbothered by the formal atmosphere, he started a casual conversation. Relieved to see Chose's attention shift, Kakashi Hatake finally relaxed. Tsukumo had been on the receiving end of Chose's relentless chatter just moments ago, and while his polite demeanor prevented him from saying anything, the experience had been draining. Now that Chose had targeted Takuya instead, Tsukumo could only watch in amusement, curious to see if the young man could handle the larger-than-life elder. "Yeah, this meeting's a snooze," Takuya replied bluntly, lowering his voice so only Chose could hear. Minato, seated nearby, tried to suppress a grimace. "Is this really appropriate? This is a high-level meeting, for crying out loud." But Takuya didn't care. If Chose wanted to chat, why not humor him? "By the way, Chose-senpai, have you been working on any new recipes? I've always admired your culinary skills," Takuya said, shifting the conversation to food. Chose blinked, momentarily caught off guard. "Wait, I wasn't planning to talk about food. What was this kid playing at?" Still, faced with Takuya's enthusiasm, Chose had no choice but to go along. "Ahaha, well, I've been dabbling here and there. If you're interested, we could brainstorm some ideas together sometime," Chose said, trying to steer the discussion back to his original agenda. "Absolutely. I'd love to visit you and learn a thing or two. I can't resist a good meal," Takuya replied, leaning in eagerly. What followed was a rapid-fire exchange of culinary tips, with Takuya rattling off a series of detailed ideas. Chose, flustered, struggled to keep up. "I wasn't trying to discuss recipes, damn it." He had approached Takuya with the intention of softening him up for a favor. Instead, Takuya had led him into a conversational cul-de-sac, leaving Chose stuck and floundering. As Takuya's enthusiasm grew, Chose's smile became increasingly strained. Meanwhile, Tsukumo, watching the scene unfold, couldn't hold back his laughter. "Serves you right. Now you know how I felt earlier. Enjoy the ride, Chose." Cough, cough. Desperate to escape, Chose faked a coughing fit, hoping someone would intervene. But no one paid him any mind. The rest of the room was focused on Yagura, discussing the logistics of a joint investigation into the third Mizukage. "You got yourself into this mess. Don't expect us to bail you out," was the unspoken sentiment. Eventually, Tsunade, unable to take any more of Chose's antics, shot Takuya a warning glare. Only then did Takuya back down, allowing Chose a moment of reprieve. Takuya knew full well what Chose's true intentions were. Earlier, he had seen the older man pestering Tsukumo about speaking up for the third Hokage and Denzo. What a waste of effort. "If you're going to play dirty, don't expect me to play along. You came to me, so you'll have to deal with the consequences. Everyone, once this matter is thoroughly investigated, the war between our villages can come to an end. I trust none of you wish to see more of our comrades sacrificed on the battlefield," Yagura said earnestly, addressing the room. "Though misunderstandings exist between our villages, I believe this incident provides an opportunity to strengthen our bond and secure lasting peace. Surely, that's a goal we all share. Convincing Hidden Leaf Village's leadership to cooperate with Hidden Mist Village would not be easy." Chapter 450, The Tempting Offer from Hidden Mist Village. After all, this was an internal matter of Hidden Mist Village. Besides, the two villages were still technically at war. Even if Hidden Leaf Village wanted to end the pointless conflict, it wouldn't readily agree to Yagura's proposal. Between nations and villages, there was no such thing as genuine goodwill, only eternal and unchanging interests. For the sake of interests, even blood brothers could turn against each other. So, what hope was there for two rival villages? Take Hidden Sand Village, for example. The village had repeatedly forged alliances with Hidden Leaf Village, only to stab it in the back each time. After losing battles, they'd turn around and reconcile, only to betray Hidden Leaf Village again, a classic case of a leopard never changing its spots. Ultimately, everything boiled down to benefits. Hidden Leaf Village might want to end the war, but what else would it gain from doing so? The room fell silent. Not even Tsunade spoke. The third Hokage puffed slowly on his pipe, his eyes calm but contemplative. Yagura sat quietly, watching the third Hokage. He was waiting for the Hokage to state his terms. Even if ending the war would benefit Hidden Leaf Village, convincing it to cooperate with the investigation into the third Mizukage's situation wouldn't be easy. Without offering significant benefits, it was almost impossible to reach an agreement. Yagura wasn't some naive child, he understood the unspoken rules. He had come prepared with leverage to persuade the third Hokage. Now, he just needed the Hokage to take the bait. While Minato appeared visibly nervous, Takuya lounged on the table, staring intently at the patterns on his teacup as if it held the secrets of the universe. Cough, cough. Breaking the silence after a few moments, the third Hokage extinguished his pipe. Nearby, Tsunade, her patience wearing thin, opened a window to let fresh air circulate through the conference room. Her disapproving glare at the Hokage spoke volumes. "Sorry, force of habit," the third Hokage's apologetic smile seemed to say. But Tsunoda ignored him. Resigned, the Hokage turned to Yagura and said, "Yagura, while you make a compelling argument and Hidden Leaf Village is certainly eager to end this conflict between our villages, there's one issue you've overlooked. Whether the third Mizukage is being controlled or has been replaced is ultimately an internal matter for Hidden Mist Village. By principle, Hidden Leaf Village cannot interfere." Yagura responded promptly, having anticipated this objection. Once the matter is resolved, Hidden Mist Village is willing to sign a non-aggression pact with Hidden Leaf Village. The offer was calculated, and Yagura's tone was steady. Compared to a simple peace treaty, a non-aggression pact carried much stronger commitments. Peace treaties could be broken for the sake of interests, with betrayal justified by pragmatic reasons. But violating a non-aggression pact brought significant consequences, condemnation at best, outright hostility from other villages at worst. Even among the 5 great shinobi villages, where competition often turned violent, maintaining appearances and diplomatic norms was crucial. For Hidden Leaf Village, a pact like this would be incredibly advantageous. With its abundant resources and historically defensive stance, Hidden Leaf Village stood to gain much from such an agreement. If possible, the third Hokage would have loved to get all 4 other Kage to sign similar agreements with Hidden Leaf Village. Cough, cough, this. The third Hokage's interest was piqued. If Hidden Leaf Village could secure peace with Hidden Mist Village after dealing with Hidden Sand Village, it would gain a significant window of opportunity for growth. Yagura pressed further, his voice calm but resolute. Additionally, Master Genji has pledged that once this matter is clarified, Hidden Mist Village will open its maritime trade routes to the Land of Fire. I believe the daimyo will have no objections to this arrangement. The room was still, the implications sinking in. Hidden Mist Village, situated in the Land of Water, had always guarded its maritime routes fiercely. Even the Land of Lightning's Hidden Clouds Village, which had developed substantial naval capabilities, struggled to match Hidden Mist Village's dominance over the seas. For Hidden Leaf Village and the Land of Fire, gaining access to these routes would be a dream come true, benefiting both the village and the daimyo immensely. Cough, cough. This time, the third Hokage coughed not out of habit but genuine astonishment. The other attendees exchanged incredulous looks, struggling to believe Yagura was offering such favorable terms. For years, Hidden Leaf Village had sought access to these maritime routes but had been thwarted repeatedly by Hidden Mist Village's staunch opposition. With the third Mizukage in control, any hopes of negotiating such an arrangement had been impossible. Now, Yagura's proposal was nothing short of a miracle. Even Takeya couldn't help but be impressed. Master Genji must truly have remarkable vision, he thought. Upon reflection, the offer made sense. The prolonged wars had drained both villages significantly. Opening maritime trade routes would accelerate recovery and development for both sides. With economic recovery requiring vast resources, this proposal represented a win-win opportunity. Moreover, while Yagura alone couldn't make such a decision, Master Genji held the authority to enforce it. If he was behind this proposal, it was clear he sought to end Hidden Mist Village's destructive policies and usher in a new era of stability. Is this true? The third Hokage's tone was one of thinly veiled excitement. His initial interest in the non-aggression pact had now blossomed into full-blown enthusiasm for the maritime trade agreement. If this deal came to fruition, the Land of Fire and Hidden Leaf Village would gain access to an untapped wealth of resources, propelling the village into a period of unparalleled growth. Yagura nodded solemnly. This is Master Genji's promise to the Hokage. Should your village cooperate with us in uncovering the truth, Master Genji will ensure this agreement is realized. Then, what would you need from us for this investigation? The third Hokage's response left no doubt. Hidden Leaf Village was ready to cooperate. No one in the room objected. Not even Tsunoda. The benefits were simply too enticing to pass up. Yagura had played his cards perfectly, and it was clear that Master Genji had significant backing within Hidden Mist Village to make such a bold offer. By involving Hidden Leaf Village, Hidden Mist Village hoped to minimize risks and avoid any internal backlash while investigating their Mizukage's situation. Yagura's expression darkened, and his voice dropped. We will need your help staging a performance. A performance? Tsunoda asked, her brows furrowed in suspicion. Chapter 451, Assassinate the Third Mizukage? Sorry, not interested. What do you mean? Tsunoda broke the silence. Hidden Leaf Village cooperating with the investigation wasn't a problem. Considering the enticing conditions offered by Yagura and Genji, refusal wasn't an option. But what did staging a performance mean? Surely, they weren't asking someone from Hidden Leaf Village to pretend to be the third Mizukage? Faced with Tsunoda's question, Yagura explained calmly, we need to gather enough intelligence and evidence. Otherwise, it will be impossible to silence all the doubters. That's why we need your village to collaborate with us in staging a scene. He continued, if Hidden Leaf Village agrees, I'll return to Hidden Mist Village and have the village recall the Mizukage under the pretext of needing him back due to insufficient resources. During his journey, your village's ninja can attempt an assassination. An assassination? Why waste time on lengthy investigations when a single assassination attempt could force the Mizukage to reveal any hidden truths? Yagura and Genji weren't ones to waste time. Their approach was direct, quick and decisive, cutting through complications with a sharp blade rather than dragging things out with drawn-out investigations. So, that was the plan. They intended to work with Hidden Leaf Village to stage an assassination attempt on their own Mizukage. Using an assassination attempt to expose any anomalies was indeed a bold and efficient move. Yagura's gaze swept across the room, landing on Hidden Leaf Village's strongest candidates, Tsukumo Hatake, Takeya, and Minato. The message was clear: Hidden Leaf Village needed to deploy its elite ninja to ensure success. They would need individuals with both exceptional strength and mobility. Minato, with his flying Raijin jutsu, was unmatched in mobility. He could come and go as he pleased. As for raw power, Tsukumo Hatake and Takeya were more than capable. In fact, any one of them alone could be enough for the mission. Would Hidden Leaf Village agree to this? Minato scratched his head, looking like he wanted to say something, but he hesitated. Tsukumo Hatake smiled dryly and shook his head. I'm sorry, but I can't take on this mission. It's not suitable for me. Tsukumo. Hamura Midokado immediately protested, his tone sharp. What do you mean by that? Are you saying you're unwilling to serve the village? Tsukumo's response was steady but resolute. Apologies, but I've already decided to stay home to guide Kakashi and support his growth. I've stepped away from active duty, and this task should fall to someone else. Although he had made an exception for Tsunade to take part in the battlefield, Tsukumo Hatake had no intention of accepting further assignments unless absolutely necessary. After all, Hidden Leaf Village had no shortage of capable shinobi who could handle this task. Your village politics are a mess, Yagura thought to himself. To have the esteemed White Fang of Hidden Leaf Village essentially sidelined, unwilling to contribute, what a glaring indictment of poor leadership. Tsukumo's refusal was a slap in the face, and the awkward atmosphere that followed was palpable. Even Hamura and Koharu looked visibly irritated, their expressions stiff. The third Hokage remained silent, puffing on his pipe, while Tsunade rolled her eyes, unable to hide her disdain. This is what happens when you create such a mess, her expression seemed to say. Does it hurt to see it backfire now? But the real surprise came when Takeya, who had been idly staring at his teacup, suddenly spoke up, I'm not going either. I'm tired and need to stay in the village to rest for at least a year. I also have students to train, so I don't have the time or energy to deal with this kind of task. If Tsukumo's refusal was a slap, Takeya's rejection was a full-on gut punch. Yagura's expression faltered, and his gaze flickered between Takeya and Tsukumo in disbelief. Why? The third Hokage's face darkened, his composure slipping. Takeya shrugged casually. No particular reason. I just don't feel like going. In the past, I had no choice and was dragged into missions that weren't even my responsibility. But now, I'm done. I need a break. If you think I'm not doing enough for the village, that's your opinion. I have nothing more to say. The pointed tone in Takeya's words left no room for further argument. When you were busy stirring up trouble, did you ever stop to ask yourselves why? Now you want to act like you're the ones being wronged? Spare me, Takeya thought, his expression unreadable. Meanwhile, Minato looked like he was about to cry. All eyes were on him now, as if silently saying, don't you dare refuse. With both Tsukumo and Takeya unwilling to participate, Hidden Leaf Village's leadership was desperate. If Minato also refused, the high-ranking officials would undoubtedly be in an uproar. For this mission, Minato's unique mobility was crucial. Without him, the plan would face significant challenges. Unlike Tsukumo and Takeya, Minato lacked the clout to outright refuse. The contributions and influence of the other two granted them a degree of autonomy, but Minato wasn't yet at that level. Seeing the growing tension, Tsunade intervened, breaking the awkward silence. Let's focus on the plan first, she said, addressing Yagura directly. Explain the details of how you intend to proceed. The underlying message was clear, discussions about personnel could wait until later, behind closed doors. There was no need to air internal conflicts in front of an outsider. Hamura and Koharu quickly followed Tsunade's lead, redirecting the meeting back to the matter at hand. Yagura noticed the swift shift in tone but didn't comment. So, Hidden Leaf Village's internal politics aren't entirely stable either, he mused. Still, he refrained from making any disparaging observations. After all, Hidden Mist Village had no room to judge. Among the 5 great shinobi villages, Hidden Leaf Village's disputes were largely behind closed doors, while Hidden Mist Village's internal strife was notorious and out in the open. The infamous Blood Mist Terror was a testament to the chaos within Hidden Mist Village. Even Yagura himself was deeply entangled in the turmoil, often serving as the third Mizukage's weapon. Many ninja had perished under his hand, their lives claimed during the height of the Blood Mist's brutality. So, who was he to laugh at Hidden Leaf Village? The assassination is our initial plan, Yagura explained. However, if Hidden Leaf Village has a better alternative, we're open to adjustments. The goal isn't to kill the Mizukage outright but to force him into a corner where he has no choice but to reveal his true nature. In life and death situations, even the most guarded individuals would inevitably expose themselves. Unless, of course, they had a death wish and chose to face their end without resistance. Yagura's tone was firm as he continued, that's why we need ninja with exceptional strength, explosive capabilities, and unparalleled mobility to assist us. During the operation, Hidden Mist Village's forces will remain in the shadows, ensuring everything is attributed to an external assassination attempt. Whether the plan succeeded or failed, the blame would be deflected onto unknown adversaries. The room nodded subtly in agreement. Even if they were in Yagura's position, they would have taken the same approach. Tsunoda glanced at the silent third Hokage and the ever-unbothered Takeya, who seemed more interested in his tea than the discussion at hand. If you had handled things differently back then, would we even be in this mess now? She thought to herself, sighing inwardly. Chapter 452, Your reward is me sending Denzo to prison. We need some time to deliberate. A concealed rest area has already been prepared by the Anbu. You and your subordinates can head there for now. Once we've reached a decision, we will inform you immediately. Since Yagura had come to Hidden Leaf Village in secret, it was impossible for him to be seen openly wandering around the village. Tsunoda had already prepared a secluded location for them to rest. Despite her distaste for unnecessary hassle, she had the capability to handle Hidden Leaf Village's affairs with precision and efficiency. Then I'll leave it to you. Please give this matter your serious consideration, Yagura replied. He understood this wasn't a decision that could be made in just a few words. He had said all that needed to be said and presented terms that were hard to refuse. Now, all that remained was for Hidden Leaf Village's leaders to reach a conclusion. But Yagura was confident, under such tempting conditions, Hidden Leaf Village would have no choice but to agree. Both Hidden Leaf Village and the Land of Fire had been coveting access to maritime trade routes for a long time. Compared to Hidden Leaf Village, Hidden Clouds Village's economy thrived, largely thanks to its advantageous sea routes. Without those, Hidden Clouds Village's geographic position would not allow it to compete with Hidden Leaf Village. The sea route profits were Yagura and Genji's trump card. Yagura left the meeting room with his guards, following the Anbu to the quiet, secluded courtyard Tsunoda had arranged for them. Once the outsider was gone, the atmosphere in the meeting room changed. The third Hokage raised his head, looking at Tsukumo Hatake, who had been silent the entire time. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but the words, full of regret and apology, were stuck in his throat. Watching his hesitation, Tsunoda rolled her eyes in frustration. All right, enough of this dithering. You're acting more indecisive than me, and I'm the woman here. Tsunoda snapped, slapping the table to refocus the group. Yagura has laid his conditions on the table. Let's hear it. Should we agree to this or not? We must agree, of course. The third Hokage quickly responded. When it came to admitting fault or apologizing, Hiruzen Saratobe hesitated endlessly. But when it came to discussing benefits for Hidden Leaf Village, his decisiveness returned instantly. Hidden Clouds Village's economic success owes much to its maritime trade routes and strong naval presence. If we could secure similar access, Hidden Leaf Village's future would be even more prosperous. He continued. The village's development and military strength both depended on funding. With sufficient funds, Hidden Leaf Village could continue to grow. This was an undeniable fact. Hiruzen is correct. On behalf of the Elder Council, I support agreeing to this. Koharu Utatane stated without hesitation. Tsunoda nodded and shifted her gaze toward Akimeki Choza and Nara Shikashich. The former looked bemused, while the latter sighed wryly. Why are you asking us? We retired years ago. Akimeki Choza grumbled, scratching his head. Whatever you decide is fine. But this is clearly a good deal, so I support it. He added. I agree as well. Nara Shikashich said, following Choza's lead. After all, the Inoshikacho trio always stood together on matters like this. Excellent. Tsunoda said with finality. Since we're all in agreement, I'll take responsibility for organizing this. Minato, your mastery of the flying Raijin Jutsu makes you crucial for this operation. You'll be part of the plan to stage an assassination attempt on the third Mizukage. Her words left no room for argument. Minato could only sigh inwardly and nod. Once named, he had no choice but to comply. Besides, he didn't have the standing to refuse. Sakamo Hatake and Takuya will handle the core of the operation. You're not required to kill the third Mizukage, but you must force him to reveal his true nature. Tsunade added, her tone firm. What authority? The third Hokage, Koharu, Hamura, and Akimeki Choza all looked at Tsunade in astonishment. Moments ago, Sakamo Hatake and Takuya had both outright rejected the mission, leaving no room for negotiation. Yet now, with Tsunade's commanding tone, the decision seemed final. She didn't consult them, she simply declared the task assigned. Are you serious? Takuya blinked in surprise, trying to gauge her intent. Sakamo Hatake stared at her in confusion. Didn't I already refuse? If it had been anyone else, both men would have rejected the mission a second time, this time even more firmly. But Tsunade wasn't just anyone. I understand why you both refused earlier. Tsunade said. But this mission is uniquely suited to your skills. While there are other candidates, mobilizing them would create unnecessary complications. That's why I'm asking you two specifically. She paused, then dropped her bombshell. This mission offers no material reward. But I can promise you this, if you accept, I will personally ensure Denzo is sent to prison and kept under round-the-clock guard. What? Sakamo Hatake was stunned, while Takuya gave her an impressed thumbs up. Absolutely not. The third Hokage shouted, slamming his hands on the table. Koharu and Hamura's expressions soured. Denzo was their ally, and they weren't about to let him be imprisoned. If such a move had been acceptable, it would have happened long ago. I cannot agree to this. The third Hokage protested vehemently, his face red with emotion. Yes, Denzo has made many mistakes, but he is still a pillar of this village. We cannot treat him this way. Watching this unfold, Narashikashich buried his head in his arms as if trying to disappear, while Akimeki Choza leaned back, thoroughly entertained. Little Tsunade's getting more and more like her teacher, Choza thought, thoroughly amused. But Tsunade was unmoved. Her expression cold, she replied, your objections are irrelevant. Unless you're prepared to take back the Hokage's seal, Denzo is going to prison. Her words were blunt and uncompromising. I won't expose all the damage Denzo has caused to the village. I have no intention of stirring public unrest or wasting resources on a spectacle. Sending him to prison is the best solution. Tsunade continued. To emphasize her point, she placed the Hokage's seal on the table in front of her. The message was clear, either take back the seal and undo her decision, or let her handle Denzo her way. You, Tsunade, you can't. The third Hokage was practically smoking with fury. He never expected Tsunade to act so decisively, almost as if she were staging a coup before even officially taking office. Even more shocking was the lack of opposition from the others. Koharu and Hamura, though visibly displeased, didn't openly object. Akimeki Choza merely sat back, enjoying the drama, while Narashikashich seemed content to feign sleep. Ignoring the Hokage's outburst, Tsunade turned to Sakamo Hatake and Takuya. Is that incentive enough for you? She asked. You win. Takuya muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. Sakamo Hatake coughed awkwardly, clearly caught off guard. He wanted to commend her boldness but hesitated, knowing how it would reflect on the Hokage. Tsunade didn't press him. Since neither of you are refusing outright, I'll take that as agreement. Just know that completing this mission will void your retirement, Sakamo. Chapter 453, A Hokage's Tough Call Senior, this is all I can do. From here on, it's up to you. Killing Denzo outright was simply not an option. The third Hokage would never agree to it. Even if it meant creating a rift with Tsunade, he would not allow it to happen. At this time, no one else would be foolish or reckless enough to attempt Denzo's assassination, either. Except for Takuya. Only he would harbor such thoughts. As long as Denzo ended up locked in prison, how long would it really take before the chance to finish him off presented itself? Not long at all. While Denzo was certainly capable of patience, he wouldn't sit quietly and wait for death in a cell. He would find a way to escape. And when he did, wouldn't that create the perfect justification to end him? Tsunade had already shown the utmost sincerity. Sakamo Hatake understood that from now on, his only path was to stand behind her. Denzo being thrown into prison was already satisfying. With such a compelling offer laid out before him, what reason did he have to hesitate? You all. With just a few words, Tsunade had outlined and arranged everything. The third Hokage's objections held no weight, and he trembled with suppressed fury. Hidden Leaf Village was about to change. Yet, perhaps that wasn't entirely a bad thing. Denzo and Sarutobe had indeed gone too far over the years. Choza Akimeki decided he would enjoy watching the drama unfold to its conclusion. After all, he had no intention of supporting anyone nor taking a side. He would let the master and apprentice sort out their conflict in their own time. Although he thought this way, Choza knew deep down that the third Hokage was on the verge of conceding. His bond with Denzo was indeed profound, but when weighed against the future of the village, even the strongest bonds would feel insubstantial and inconsequential. If Tsunade had sought to imprison Denzo without just cause, the third Hokage would have fought tooth and nail to stop her. However, Tsunade was offering the village's future in exchange. This left the third Hokage with no choice but to make a decision. Which was more important, Denzo or the village? Old man, that's enough. Tsunade's expression was stern. Are you really willing to gamble the village's future for the sake of Denzo? Denzo has bled for the village and contributed countless merits. The third Hokage still tried to reason with her. PFFT Takaya couldn't help but laugh aloud. Everyone immediately turned their attention to him. Takaya quickly raised his hands in mock surrender. Sorry, I didn't mean to laugh. I just suddenly felt a tickle in my throat. Yes, just a tickle. After all, I'm nothing more than a mixed-blood sinner who's neither bled for the village nor achieved anything. Please, continue. Tickle, my foot. It was clearly mockery. Why bother making excuses? The third Hokage's face turned dark, his expression like a storm cloud. His words of defense for Denzo were stuck in his throat, unable to be voiced. Yes, Denzo had bled for the village and made significant contributions. But among those present, who hadn't done the same? Why did Denzo get to stand above everyone else, scheming and manipulating, while others who had similarly contributed were left to endure his machinations? What kind of logic was that? How could he even say such things? It was absurd to hear and even more absurd to defend. Tsunade continued to stare at the third Hokage, her expression unwavering. As for Takaya's deliberate provocation, Tsunade acted as if nothing had happened. Would this escalate? Minato rubbed his forehead in exasperation and gently tugged at Takaya's sleeve. Brother, can you stop now? If you keep this up, everything's going to explode. In this situation, only Takaya dared to stir the pot. If it were him, Minato wouldn't have dared, not even with 10 times the courage. We can only imprison him. His crimes cannot be made public. A concession. Forced into a corner, the third Hokage finally gave in. Despite the deep bond he shared with Denzo, the village ultimately took precedence. The third Hokage chose the village over his personal ties. However, he required Tsunade to promise not to reveal Denzo's crimes or target him further. As long as he behaves himself and quietly lives out his days in prison, I won't pursue him further. Tsunade raised an eyebrow and nodded in agreement. The third Hokage let out a heavy sigh, slumping back into his chair. His gaze became distant as he stared at the ceiling. Koharu Utatane and Hamura Midokado sat silently, their heads lowered in tacit understanding. Well then, I will handle the remaining matters directly with Yagura. This meeting is adjourned. Senior, you can prepare accordingly. Takaya and Minato, come with me. Since the third Hokage lacked the resolve to act decisively, Tsunade pocketed the Hokage's seal and left the meeting room with Takaya and Minato. Tsukumo left without a word. Choza Akimaki pushed back his chair and stood, his rotund belly jiggling as he smiled. Hiruzen, there's no need to be like this. Denzo brought this on himself. He has to bear the consequences of his actions. I've said it before, his ambition would be his undoing sooner or later. Tsunade is a good choice. Much better than Orochimaru. I have high hopes for her. With that, Choza chuckled and walked away. After bowing to the third Hokage and the elders, Shikashi Nara followed Choza out. Did he really need to say that? If the third Hokage didn't believe in Tsunade, would he have chosen her? Would he have handed over authority to her so quickly? Choza's words stung, leaving the third Hokage with an urge to curse aloud. Humphrey, crafty old fox. Hiruzen. Koharu opened her mouth to speak. The third Hokage sighed deeply. Enough. Spare me the comforting words. As long as he stays in Hidden Leaf Village and retires peacefully, there's nothing more I can ask for. He looked at the two of them, adding, you two should assist Tsunade as much as possible in the future. If you both focus on doing your jobs well, she won't try to remove you because the village still needs you. Though Koharu and Hamura hadn't done much good over the years and often acted out of self-interest, the third Hokage's words rang true. Without suitable replacements, Tsunade wouldn't rashly remove them or strip them of their power. After all, she needed them to stabilize the medical division and other key departments. We'll do our best to support her, as long as she's willing. The two sighed in relief, their relaxation not escaping the third Hokage's notice. He nearly choked on his own frustration. Forget it. It was time to hand over the reins to Tsunade. All the scheming and power struggles had worn him down. Perhaps taking a break wouldn't be so bad. At this point, even the Elder Council no longer wanted to side with or support Denzo. What else could the third Hokage say? Chapter 454, the best candidate to guard Denzo. With Tsunade growing increasingly assertive, it seemed only a matter of time before she would officially ascend as the fourth Hokage. Unless Koharu Utatane and Hamura Midokado had lost all reason, there was no way they would dare to stir up trouble like before. Even though Tsunade was clearly displeased with them, she couldn't simply strip them of their authority overnight, at least not unless they got involved with Denzo. If they continued their old ways and supported him, they would undoubtedly face the consequences. Now that Denzo was beyond saving, not even the third Hokage could protect him. Unless they had a death wish, Koharu and Hamura would be wise to steer clear of him entirely. In the Hokage's office, Tsunade instructed Minato, "Minato, go fetch Nawaki and bring him here." "Understood." Minato replied, disappearing swiftly. Once Minato left, only Tsunade and Takuya remained in the office. Takuya grinned, giving her a thumbs up. "You're really laying down the law." "Knock it off," Tsunade said, rolling her eyes and placing her hands firmly on the desk. "Do you think I enjoy this? It's only because you refuse to cooperate. The old man still wants to shield Denzo. I can't fathom why he's worth protecting so much. People have their bonds," Takuya said with a shrug. Tsunade was momentarily stunned before letting out a laugh born of sheer frustration. Bonds? Was he implying there was some unspeakable connection between the third Hokage and Denzo? "Quit spouting nonsense. Go keep an eye on Denzo. Nawaki will meet you later. He'll be responsible for guarding him for the foreseeable future." "Nawaki?" Takuya raised a hand, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "Shouldn't we assign someone else? Nawaki's a bit too straightforward, he's easy to fool." "My brother is straightforward, not stupid." Tsunade's voice rose as she stood abruptly. "He's spent so much time with you that you've practically turned him into one of your own. Do you honestly think Denzo could deceive him? Do you have some kind of prejudice against straightforward people?" Straightforwardness, after all, had its perks. Such individuals might be naive or gullible at times, but once they'd formed an opinion, they were immovable. Nawaki had long concluded that Denzo was no good. No matter what tricks Denzo tried or how eloquent he became, he couldn't sway Nawaki in the slightest. In fact, Nawaki wouldn't even spare Denzo a glance. This made him incredibly difficult to manipulate. Once someone's impression of you was ruined, they wouldn't waste a second on you. The best way to deal with a manipulator? Deny them any chance to act. It didn't matter what you said or how well you performed, to Nawaki, it would all be theatrics. Such steadfastness could drive even the most skilled manipulator to madness. Still, describing her brother as straightforward like that. Was she really his sister? Later, Nawaki's face flushed red as he held the mission scroll, barely able to contain his excitement. Finally. "That old bastard is going down. Sis, you're the best." He had long despised Denzo. The man deserved nothing less than death, though imprisonment was a decent consolation. Unfortunately, the third Hokage had always been too soft. But now, Denzo was finally heading to prison. It was immensely satisfying. With his rank, Denzo would surely be confined to the high-security section of Hidden Lee Village's prison, where inmates had no chance of stepping outside their cells. It wasn't much better than solitary confinement. For someone without strong mental fortitude, it was a surefire way to break them. "Your sister truly is formidable." Minato found himself clutching his chest, recalling Tsunade's decisive actions in a meeting. The drama had been thrilling but a bit too intense. It was the kind of spectacle that could unsettle anyone. How had he survived that meeting? The adrenaline alone had been exhausting. "Come on, let's go find Takuya. I haven't seen him in ages. I wonder what special mission he's been on lately," Nawaki said, eager to move. Placing a hand on Nawaki's shoulder, Minato activated the Flying Thunder God Jutsu, transporting them to Takuya's location. "Takuya, I..." Before Nawaki could finish, he noticed Pakura standing beside Takuya and froze. He'd seen Pakura's profile photo before, but photos only showed headshots. Seeing her in person was another matter entirely. Pakura's figure couldn't rival Tsunade's, but it was certainly unique in its own right. It explained why she wore an open-back combat outfit. Sometimes, physical proportions could even affect one's mobility in combat. This was no joke. Snap out of it. Minato felt second-hand embarrassment and pulled on Nawaki's sleeve, stepping aside. "Really? Look at Minato. Then look at you. Staring at a woman? Can't you show some restraint? Wait, Minato has a girlfriend? Oh, then never mind." Ahem. Realizing his faux pas, Nawaki's face turned crimson. He waved his hands frantically. "That's not what I meant. I just didn't expect Pakura to be here, so... So you got distracted?" Takuya teased. Nawaki was dumbfounded. Pakura gave Takuya a sidelong glance before turning away, and Minato couldn't help but laugh. "What's so funny?" Nawaki muttered, wishing he could disappear. Did Minato not realize how awkward this was? Takuya put an arm around Nawaki's shoulder and spoke earnestly. Minato's allowed to laugh. He has a girlfriend, after all. A girlfriend? Nawaki's eyes widened. How come I didn't know? Takuya chuckled. He probably didn't want you to. If not for Kushina, even I wouldn't have known. Minato's pretty sneaky. As soon as he got back to the village, he was off buying gifts for his sweetheart. Guess who ran into him? Kushina. Talk about coincidence. No loyalty whatsoever. Clearly, women mattered more than brothers. Nawaki felt betrayed. That brat. In his quarters, Denzo nearly crushed the brush in his hand. Despite his efforts to remain calm, Takuya always found ways to irritate him, stirring his anger over and over. Now he was being openly mocked. Takuya had brought his friends to laugh and joke outside his room, talking about trivial matters like girlfriends and romance. What nonsense. Denzo told himself he was above this. Everything he did was for Hidden Leaf Village. How could these brats possibly compare? How about we grab a meal together? Nawaki suggested. Once he started guarding Denzo, he wouldn't have time for socializing. Who knew when they'd meet again? After exchanging glances, Takuya and Minato agreed. They understood Nawaki's intentions and decided to oblige. Chapter 455, Denzo, I refuse to believe Saratobi would do this to me. Alright, let's grab a meal before heading out on a mission. Takuya said casually. The mission was clear, Denzo was destined for prison sooner or later. A small delay to eat wouldn't change anything. It's just a meal. It won't take long. What should we eat? Nawaki, being the one who suggested it, was naturally given the task of deciding. As long as it wasn't rice balls or dumplings, Takuya didn't mind. Let me think. Nawaki replied, raising a hand to stop Takuya from rushing him as he gave the matter serious thought. Minato stayed silent, sharing Takuya's sentiment. The difference was that Takuya disliked specific foods, while Minato wasn't picky and would eat anything. After some deliberation, Nawaki hesitated and suggested, how about hot pot? Seriously? Minato was quick to object. Are you out of your mind? Hot pot, here? What are you even thinking? The guy inside hasn't had a proper meal all day, and you're planning a hot pot? Do you want him to despise you forever? No way. Nawaki said, his eyes wide in disbelief. Sure, Nawaki didn't like Denzo either, but if tasked with guarding him, he wouldn't let him go hungry. It was a good thing Nawaki didn't know that Denzo had been surviving on military ration pills for days. Otherwise, his jaw might have hit the floor. Hot pot sounds good. Let's go with that. Takuya said with a grin, turning to Pakura. Pakura, can you find Kushina and ask her to set it up? Just bring over what you prepare, I've got the rest covered. Hot pot? No problem. It could be arranged in no time. Why not just host a banquet here while you're at it? Pakura thought, her lips twitching. The last time Takuya had set up a barbecue in the courtyard, complete with watermelon and drinks, it had already stretched her perception of normalcy. Now he wanted hot pot? While not illegal, the aroma of hot pot would likely drive certain individuals mad. Poor guy. Pakura left to make arrangements. Meanwhile, Nawaki nudged Takuya with his shoulder, grinning mischievously. Aren't you afraid Kushina and Mikoto will get jealous with you keeping a beauty like Pakura around? He teased. Takuya shot him an annoyed look. Your sister isn't jealous, so why would they be? Don't project your insecurities onto me. That's just mean. Nawaki protested. Sure, the relationship between Tsunade and Takuya was unconventional, but was it really okay to say such things? Nawaki felt betrayed. Takuya was his buddy, yet here he was, practically his brother-in-law. What next? Stepbrother? Minato, meanwhile, rolled his eyes so hard he might have seen the back of his skull. He silently thanked the heavens that he had no sisters or brothers. Otherwise, he'd likely end up in Nawaki's shoes. Face it, Kushina and Takuya's bond was evident. Nawaki and Tsunade treated Kushina like family. But the ambiguous closeness between Tsunade and Takuya? That was a recipe for chaos. Nawaki shoved Minato aside, grumbling loudly. Why don't you say that to my sister's face? He challenged. Takuya. Minato. If Tsunade overheard, she wouldn't lash out at Takuya, but Nawaki wouldn't escape unscathed. When the hot pot was ready, the feast began. The rich aroma wafting through the courtyard lingered, teasing their noses. Meanwhile, inside, Denzo clutched his brush so tightly that his hand trembled. I can endure this. I can endure this. I can't endure this any longer. 2 hours had passed, and the hot pot feast still wasn't over. This was no mere meal, it was a calculated insult. With a sour expression, Denzo stormed out, only to find Takuya calmly setting down his chopsticks and drawing the Kusanagi sword. Denzo froze, caught off guard. He had been ready to reprimand them, But Takuya had already armed himself and was approaching. Was this brat really turning the tables on me? Denzo. Takuya said coldly, the sword gleaming in his hand, I am under orders to take you into custody and escort you to Hidden Leaf Village prison. You have two choices, surrender peacefully and come with us, or resist and risk me slipping up and taking your head off by accident. Takuya feigned a sigh, continuing, really, Orochimaru sharpened this sword too much. One wrong move and... well, accidents happen. Minato and Nawaki choked back laughter, coughing to hide their amusement. Bakura, unfazed, merely observed. By now, she was used to Takuya's antics. Even if he decapitated Denzo on the spot, she wouldn't bat an eye. To her, this was just Takuya being Takuya, chaotic but undeniably powerful. Denzo's mind raced. He had expected Takuya to humiliate him but was blindsided by the announcement of his imminent imprisonment. Preposterous. After a moment of stunned silence, Denzo erupted. Takuya Yagami, do you take me for a fool? Sarutobi would never imprison me. This is nothing more than your petty revenge. Ah, Denzo, still clinging to hope. Sadly for him, this wasn't Sarutobi's decision to make. Takuya didn't even bother arguing. Denzo wouldn't believe him anyway, convinced instead that this was a vendetta. Think whatever you like. Takuya said with a smirk. The mission orders are official and bear the Hokage's seal. Unfortunately, I can't show them to you because... well, you're not worthy. Takuya raised his sword slightly. So, what's it going to be? Surrender peacefully, or do I take you down and drag you there myself? If you resist and end up dead, well, I'll call it an accident. Denzo sneered, his hands behind his back. You expect me to believe that? Lord Denzo. Minato interjected, stepping forward with a serious expression. This is indeed an official order from the Hokage's office. Please don't make this harder on us. Nawaki and Bakura flanked Denzo, cutting off any potential escape routes. Though they doubted he could flee, caution was always wise. I demand to see Sarutobi Hiruzen. Denzo's voice boomed as he dropped all pretense of respect, referring to the third Hokage by name. Unless Sarutobi himself said otherwise, Denzo refused to believe the order was real. Takuya spat on the ground in irritation. Alright, come out, all of you. Witness this moment. I don't want anyone accusing me of foul play later. Tsunade had anticipated this scenario. Knowing Denzo wouldn't surrender quietly, she had dispatched Anbu to assist Takuya. Not only would they ensure the mission's success, but they would also serve as witnesses, quelling any rumors of misconduct. Chapter 456, What offense? Haven't we already offended him? If Denzo were to suddenly attack or try to escape, Takuya would immediately move to capture him, and by then, there would be plenty of witnesses to testify. This precaution was to avoid any unexpected incidents that might give the third Hokage and his cohorts a reason to nitpick. After a moment of silence, a group of Anbu ninjas emerged from the shadows, surrounding the courtyard. This can't be. As Denzo watched the Anbu surround his residence, no matter how much he believed the third Hokage cherished. Cough, cough. Trusted him, he couldn't foolishly think Takuya was merely joking. Takuya might not represent the Hokage's office, but the Anbu's involvement confirmed the seriousness of the situation. After all, they were directly under the Hokage's command. You. Denzo pointed at the two Anbu captains standing at the front, his voice filled with rage. You dare collude with this brat to deceive me. I demand to see Hiruzen Sarutobi. You have no authority to deal with me. The Anbu captain, looking troubled, said, Please don't make this difficult for us, Lord Denzo. This is indeed an order from the Hokage's office. What? To Denzo, these words were like a bolt of lightning on a clear day, leaving him stunned and disoriented. He didn't believe Takuya's claims, but the actions of the Anbu provided solid proof. Denzo's days of comfort were over, and he was destined to spend the rest of his life in prison. Whose order was this? Was it Hiruzen Sarutobi or Tsunade? As the so-called root of Hidden Leaf Village, Denzo was not one to lose his composure so easily. In no time, he regained his composure and coldly questioned the two Anbu captains. Well? The two captains hesitated, glancing toward Takuya for guidance. Takuya shrugged indifferently, signaling them to speak freely. The captains let out a sigh of relief and answered truthfully, it was Lady Tsunade's order, but Lord Hokage did not oppose it. The other elders were also in agreement. In other words, Denzo, surrender yourself peacefully and don't put us in a difficult position. Although the order came from Tsunade, the third Hokage and the others did not object. Denzo had been abandoned. No matter how deep his ties with the third Hokage ran, Hiruzen wouldn't step forward to defend him. Hiruzen Sarutobi. Denzo growled through clenched teeth, his one visible eye filled with madness. It was evident that he wouldn't comply without resistance. But this was exactly what Takuya was hoping for. He wanted Denzo to stop enduring. He wanted Denzo to retaliate, to fight back, or better yet, to defect from the village. This would give him ample justification to eliminate Denzo once and for all. Brother, I understand your desire to kill Denzo. I'd like to see that old man gone too. But with your repeated threats and provocations, aren't you afraid he might just give in and surrender? Surrounded as he was, Denzo's chances of escape were slim. Minato thought Takuya could easily subdue him alone. But wouldn't all this pressure and intimidation backfire? Why are you looking at me like that? Noticing Minato's curious gaze, Takuya ignored him. Now wasn't the time for such discussions, though he could guess what Minato was thinking. It was likely about his methods of provocation, which might compel Denzo to surrender. After all, Denzo feared death. What Minato didn't understand was that Denzo was not just afraid of dying, he was terrified. Forcing him to resist was nearly impossible. Pressure and threats were merely tools to provoke him. Otherwise, Takuya wouldn't waste time talking. He'd simply draw his sword and strike. Though Denzo was seething with anger at the moment, Takuya could already tell that the old schemer was planning his next moves. Denzo was likely considering how to endure this situation, biding his time in Hidden Leaf Village's prison until he could escape, or even defect from the village altogether. Make no mistake, if push came to shove, Denzo would rather defect than spend his final days imprisoned in Hidden Leaf Village. As someone prone to paranoia and obsessed with control, Denzo wouldn't trust anyone else with his fate. In his mind, his destiny was secure only when it was under his own control. Promises and guarantees from others were unreliable and could be broken at any moment. Please don't make this harder for us, Lord Denzo. The Anbu captain issued another warning. Damn it. Denzo's eye burned with hatred as he glared at Takuya, like a furious beast ready to tear him apart. Today's events. I'll remember this. He swore revenge. As for imprisonment? That wasn't an option. Once he was in Hidden Leaf Village's prison, he would find a way to escape. Hidden Leaf Village was no longer under his control. Staying hidden in the village was no longer viable. Denzo would need to flee as soon as possible and relocate all his research. In his current state, Denzo trusted no one, not even Orochimaru. The Snake Sannin could easily switch allegiance to Tsunade at any moment. If Orochimaru were to betray him and reveal everything, Denzo would be done for. Given the chance to absolve himself, Orochimaru wouldn't hesitate to pin all the blame on Denzo. The village would likely support this decision. After all, placing all the blame on one person was far less damaging than implicating two. Losing Denzo wouldn't shake Hidden Leaf Village much, but losing both him and Orochimaru would be a severe blow. Do as you please. Takuya shrugged nonchalantly. More grudges didn't faze him. There was no chance for reconciliation between him and Denzo. So why worry about offending him? He had already burned those bridges long ago. However, Denzo's endurance exceeded Takuya's expectations. He had hoped for an outburst of violence or an escape attempt, but alas, he had overestimated. Denzo chose to surrender, allowing the Anbu to restrain him with specialized tools and even seal his chakra. What's the point of all this? Denzo's compliance brought a collective sigh of relief from everyone present. Minato approached and whispered, "See? Your provocations backfired. You know nothing." Provoking him was the only way to incite rebellion. Takuya rolled his eyes. Minato was still too inexperienced. No wonder the third Hokage had manipulated him into being a puppet Hokage, a mere figurehead. If Minato couldn't handle the third Hokage, how could he possibly deal with Denzo? In terms of raw strength, Denzo wasn't even among the top ranks in Hidden Leaf Village. At best, he was an elite Jonin, perhaps slightly stronger than the average. It wasn't that Takuya looked down on him, Denzo's strength simply wasn't remarkable. However, when it came to scheming and manipulation, Denzo was unrivaled in Hidden Leaf Village. He could dismantle someone's life piece by piece, as Kakashi Hatake and Shizue Uchiha would attest. And they were merely examples. There were countless others whom Denzo had targeted and pressured. Anyone caught in Denzo's sights rarely came out unscathed. The only exception was Kakashi. Chapter 457, Yagora's additional request. In the original timeline, after the Third Shinobi War, Kakashi had already shown signs of a darker personality. Denzo had attempted to recruit him into Root but failed. From beginning to end, Kakashi paid Denzo no attention whatsoever. No matter how cunning or resourceful Denzo was, Kakashi remained unmoved. With the third Hokage's strong support, and without the ability to assassinate Kakashi, Denzo was left powerless. Would he really retaliate if pressured? Minato scratched his head. This didn't align with the Denzo he knew. The Denzo he knew, apart from being insidious and treacherous, was especially patient. Enough, speculating won't get us anywhere. I wouldn't be surprised if we get assigned a mission to hunt Denzo down soon. What? The Anbu led Denzo away, with Nawaki accompanying them as the guard in charge. Takuya and Minato followed behind, while Pakura, as always, stayed by Takuya's side like a loyal bodyguard. As for Takuya and Minato's conversation, Pakura quietly listened without interrupting. Minato was stunned. Hadn't Denzo chosen to surrender? Could it be that he was planning to escape? Denzo would have to escape Hidden Leaf Village and become a rogue ninja for any mission to hunt him down to be issued. Otherwise, the third Hokage would never allow such a mission to be announced. If Denzo defected, even with the deep bond between him and the third Hokage, Hiruzen would have no choice but to issue a pursuit order. Just wait and see. Takuya replied with a confident smile. Would Denzo willingly stay in prison? Absolutely not, because he feared being killed by Tsunade or Takuya under the guise of some excuse. The third Hokage's limits had been retreating step by step. In the past, Denzo could be sure that Hiruzen wouldn't take action against him. But things had changed. Everything was different now. Most importantly, Tsunade was in power. With Tsunade in charge, it meant that Takuya had significant influence. Given Takuya's deep hatred for Denzo, he would undoubtedly find ways to kill him. Even a kill first, report later approach was possible. With the constant threat of assassination looming over him in prison, Denzo couldn't remain calm. Escaping and defecting were his only options. As for the tight security in the prison, it was hardly a concern for someone like Denzo. Seals? Denzo himself was an expert in sealing techniques. Moreover, he still had people loyal to him. Although their numbers had dwindled, these individuals could assist him in escaping Hidden Leaf Village. Talking to you is exhausting. Minato wrestled with his thoughts for a while before giving up on asking more questions. Asking Takuya was pointless since he wouldn't provide straight answers. Takuya's cryptic remarks left Minato feeling like he needed time to process them. As expected, Denzo was secretly imprisoned in a maximum security cell, with Nawaki assigned to guard him. To ensure security, Tsunade even assigned an entire Anbu squad to assist Nawaki. Nawaki couldn't keep watch over Denzo 24/7 on his own. He needed rest, and during those times, the Anbu would take over. Imprisoning someone of Denzo's status, a former Hokage advisor, had to be done in secret and could not be made public. First, the third Hokage wouldn't allow it to be announced. That was the limit of his concession. Second, Tsunade wouldn't publicize it either. Hidden Leaf Village was still at war, and such news could have many adverse effects. Secret imprisonment was the only option. This arrangement also preserved some of Denzo's dignity. How long that dignity would last depended on Denzo's resourcefulness. Once everything was settled, Tsunade personally met with Yagura to finalize a series of cooperative agreements. Later that night, Takuya had just finished his bath and was preparing to sleep when an uninvited guest jumped in through the second-floor window. Takuya's face darkened as he clenched his towel. Why not just jump straight into the bathroom next time? That way, I won't even have the chance to grab a towel. I'm hungry. Exhausted from the day's events, Tsunade ignored Takuya's complaints and collapsed onto the sofa, motionless. She looked like a giant caterpillar, a description that perfectly fit her current state. Takuya shook his head in exasperation as he dried his wet hair with a towel. Pakura is resting downstairs. Ask her to make you some noodles. Her cooking isn't bad. I want a feast. After an entire day of work, Tsunade wasn't about to settle for a bowl of noodles. Pakura had already noticed the commotion in the house. In fact, the moment Tsunade approached, Pakura had sensed her presence. After confirming it was Tsunade, Pakura decisively decided to stay in her room, avoiding anything she shouldn't see. Reluctantly, Takuya used an hour of his rest time to prepare a feast for Tsunade. Watching Tsunade devour her food without any decorum, Takuya shook his head speechlessly. Did you settle things with Yagura? It's all settled. Cough, cough. It's settled. We agreed on terms that benefit Hidden Leaf Village. If everything goes smoothly, Hidden Leaf Village will enter a period of rapid development after the war. Tsunade patted her chest and swallowed the food that had almost choked her. She then grabbed the rice cooker, scooping rice directly from it with a spoon, dissatisfied with the size of her bowl. Oh, right, Yagura had an additional request. He wants Seimata, doesn't he? Without needing confirmation, Takuya already knew what Yagura was after. The Great Blade Seimata was of little importance to Takuya. Ever since acquiring the Kusanagi sword, he hadn't used Seimata much. For the Hidden Mist Village, however, Seimata was a symbolic weapon. If possible, they would want to reclaim it at all costs. Tsunade nodded. He offered to exchange a certain amount of chakra-infused metal for Seimata. Give it to him. Since it was something he had taken by force, Takuya didn't mind returning Seimata if Yagura truly wanted it. Especially if it came with an exchange. Trading for chakra-infused metal wasn't a bad deal. After all, Takuya didn't need Seimata anymore. The Kusanagi sword suited him better and felt more natural in his hands. After devouring the rest of her food, Tsunade, now satisfied, patted her stomach and placed a mission scroll on the table. The mission is still classified as Super S rank. The rewards are decent, but they won't mean much to you. Minato and Tsukumo might benefit more. Yagura and his people will leave secretly at 2 a.m. At dawn, you, Tsukumo, and Minato will head to the front lines and wait for further updates. The Super S rank mission rewards included allowing Minato and Kakashi Hatake to view the Forbidden Scroll of Seals and choose one ninjutsu. However, such things didn't appeal much to Takuya. For most missions, even S rank was sufficient. Chapter 458, returning to the coastal border this time, the mission was somewhat unique, which was why it was classified as a Super S rank mission. After all, the target of the mission was none other than the third Mizukage of the Hidden Mist Village. That night, Yagura and his entourage quietly left Hidden Leaf Village, just as they had arrived, without drawing anyone's attention. It wasn't until they were far from the village that the accompanying Anbu returned to Hidden Leaf Village. Since they had to wait for news from Yagura's side, Takuya and his team didn't need to rush to their destination. Early the next morning, at the village gate, Kakashi Hatake, dressed in sharp combat attire, smiled and said, "I thought we wouldn't get a chance to team up again, but here we are so soon. If I had the choice, I wouldn't want to make this trip." Takuya replied with a faint smile. Minato rolled his eyes. "You're really daring to say that?" If Minato had said something like this, especially in broad daylight, Tsunade would have made sure he regretted it. "What's with the eye roll? Did your girlfriend comfort you already?" Minato had only recently returned from a mission and barely had time to rest before being sent out again for this special task. For someone like Minato, deeply in love, this separation felt particularly harsh. After all, young couples are often inseparable. Go to hell. It's just an eye roll, isn't it? Why drag my personal life into this? Watching Takuya and Minato banter, Kakashi Hatake smiled and said, "Ah, youth is such a wonderful thing." Since the mission didn't require additional personnel, the three registered their departure at the village gates and left Hidden Leaf Village, heading toward the frontline encampment. There was no urgency in their schedule, and Takuya didn't ask Minato to assist with faster travel. The trio walked at a leisurely pace. After all, Yagura likely hadn't even reached the coastline yet. Rushing to get there would serve no purpose. The mission wouldn't begin until Yagura returned to the Hidden Mist Village and reported to the Elder Council. As for the risk of being spotted by spies from other villages, the three weren't concerned. Even if discovered, it would appear as though they were heading to the front lines as reinforcements. As they walked, Takuya sensed something unusual. The conversation had started off normal enough. They shared amusing anecdotes, discussed combat strategies, and occasionally teased Minato about his relationship. But before long, the conversation veered into Kakashi's upbringing. Takuya couldn't help but think, you truly embody the role of a worried father. Becoming a parent really changes a person. Tsukumo's focus was entirely on his son. By nightfall, the three reached the frontline encampment. The good news was that Chio, the elderly advisor from the Sand Village, wasn't at the camp. She had taken the Sand Shinobi to various battlefields. Never thought Chio could be so considerate. At least she doesn't act like the center of the universe. After a brief period of familiarization, Chio began leading her forces to support other battle zones. I have to admit, their presence has significantly eased our burden. Chio knew that lingering at Hidden Leaf Village as camp wasn't appropriate, even as an ally providing reinforcements. Staying too long would undoubtedly lead Orochimaru to find a way to send her packing. To save everyone the trouble, Chio voluntarily left for the battlefield, sparing Orochimaru the effort of scheming. Reinforcements were temporary. Neither side trusted the other enough to share sensitive information completely. The only thing they could provide was resources. Because of the third Hokage's concessions, Hidden Leaf Village had to cover the resource costs for the Sand Village's reinforcements. This arrangement had been in place for some time, but every time Takuya thought about it, he felt a herd of mythical beasts stampeding through his heart. Orochimaru, as always, spoke with a calm and collected demeanor, as if he had never been involved in the plots against Kakashi Hatake. Though he had only been an accomplice, Orochimaru bore some responsibility for the schemes targeting Tsukumo. Did the old man stay out of the negotiations this time? Jiraiya asked, visibly concerned. The negotiations between the third Hokage and Chio had left many people stunned. Jiraiya feared that if Hiruzen Sarutobi got involved again, the resulting terms would once again disadvantage Hidden Leaf Village. Having been burned once, everyone was wary. It was a classic case of once bitten, twice shy. Takuya burst into laughter, while Minato couldn't suppress his chuckles. Tsukumo smiled and replied, the Hokage was present, but Tsunade made the final decisions. You can rest assured there won't be any terms that harm the village. That's a relief. Jiraiya exhaled, grinning as he pulled exaggerated faces. Orochimaru, observing him, silently cursed in his heart, "Idiot. I'm just worried the old man might mess things up. At his age, he should rest and let Tsunade handle things. She's doing a great job, so now I can finally relax." Neither Jiraiya nor Orochimaru asked about the specifics of the agreement. When the time came, they would be informed. Until then, it was better not to cry. Whether it was Takeya's imagination or not, he felt Orochimaru's complexion had darkened, as though he'd been out in the sun too long. Orochimaru handed them a few mission scrolls and said, "Since you didn't hide your arrival, take on a few missions and patrol the battlefield. That way, spies from other villages will believe you're here as reinforcements. Minato and Tsukumo can handle that. I've got something else to do," Takeya said, making a quick exit. This kind of work was better left to Tsukumo and Minato. Takeya wanted to seize the opportunity to check on the Uchiha clan, primarily on his wife, Mikoto. As for the rest of the Uchiha, they were secondary. Before anyone could react, Takeya had bolted, leaving Minato and Tsukumo momentarily stunned. Jiraiya burst into laughter, slapping the table repeatedly. He was curious to see how Orochimaru would respond after being snubbed. Unfortunately for Jiraiya, he was overthinking it. Orochimaru didn't mind Takeya's defiance and instead teased with a smirk, "It seems Takeya-kun and Mikoto Uchiha have a very close relationship." Jiraiya. Minato. Tsukumo. Orochimaru, "You're not who I thought you were." The Uchiha had suffered significant losses in the war. The survivors carried an intense aura of hostility, driven by grief and rage. Thankfully, Mikoto Uchiha wasn't among those overcome by bloodlust. Seeing Takeya visit, Mikoto was genuinely happy. "Because of the prolonged war, many of our clan members have fallen on the battlefield. The mood among the survivors has been heavily affected," Mikoto explained with a bitter smile. Unlike her, many Uchiha had become noticeably more irritable. Takeya could only shrug. This behavior was typical of the Uchiha, likely tied to their bloodline limit, the Sharingan, which was deeply influenced by emotions. It was no wonder they were often jokingly referred to as the Insane Clan. Of course, the nickname was more of a jest, referring to how the Uchiha were easily swayed by emotions. It didn't mean they were truly insane. If anyone deserved the title of crazy, it was the Kaguya clan from the Hidden Mist village. Those people were the real lunatics. Losses were inevitable. Even the Sarutobi and Shimura clans had sent many shinobi to the battlefield, suffering heavy casualties. Compared to them, the Uchiha's loss ratio wasn't as severe. At least the Uchiha's strength gave them an edge. The ones who truly suffered were the civilian shinobi. Chapter 459, Passing a Tip to Orochimaru. The village's second rotation period is coming soon. This time, your Uchiha clan members can return to the village for some rest. Even the strongest warriors can't stay on the battlefield indefinitely. Proper rotations are essential. The exceptions were special cases like Orochimaru and Jiraiya, who would only rest after the war was over. The clan leader will be thrilled to hear this. Mikoto Uchiha said excitedly as she hugged Takeya and kissed him twice. It was only logical and fair for the Uchiha to have their rotation now. However, Fugaku Uchiha, their clan leader, was a taciturn man who rarely spoke out. Asking him to request something like this was impossible. Because of the lack of rotation, many Uchiha members were starting to resent Fugaku. Takeya understood the root of the Uchiha's issues, but such problems couldn't be solved overnight. Fortunately, Tsunade's leadership had created room for some improvement. Honestly, this rotation could have been requested long ago. If only the Uchiha clan leader had been willing to lower his pride, those who were struggling could have returned to the village earlier for rest. "I'll talk to Orochimaru about it tomorrow." Judging by Fugaku's attitude, relying on him was futile. Takeya could use his authority to send Mikoto back to Hidden Leaf Village for a break, but that might cause unrest. To avoid any unnecessary conflict, he decided to discuss a proper arrangement with Orochimaru. After all, it was only fair for the Uchiha to have their turn at rotation. You can't expect people to stay on the battlefield forever. Even farm animals aren't treated that harshly. After parting ways with Takeya, Mikoto chose not to share the news of the upcoming rotation with her clan. She didn't want them to develop further negative opinions about Fugaku. It was already frustrating enough that the clan leader hadn't taken any initiative to secure their rotation. Prolonging their time on the battlefield without any reprieve was bound to make anyone uncomfortable. At the command post, only Orochimaru remained. Jiraiya was too busy to linger, and both Kakashi Hatake and Minato had accepted a few minor tasks to make themselves useful on the battlefield. Without anyone else around, Takeya didn't bother holding back and brought up the issue of the Uchiha rotation directly. Orochimaru looked at him with mild surprise before smiling faintly. The Uchiha rotation was indeed scheduled long ago. However, their clan leader has never approached me to request it. I didn't expect you to be so concerned about the Uchiha's affairs, Takuya-kun. Cut it out. Takuya wasn't fooled by Orochimaru's probing tone. You know exactly what Fugaku Uchiha is like. If it weren't for the potential negative impact, why would I care about the Uchiha rotation? I'm just worried about Mikoto being overworked. Since a single-person rotation might cause unnecessary strife, I figured I'd help them apply for the whole clan's turn. Besides, don't bother trying to dig into my motives. I have no hidden agenda against the Uchiha, and neither does Tsunade. As long as the Uchiha follow the rules, they'll always remain a part of Hidden Leaf Village. Unlike the third Hokage and his generation, Tsunade had no particular bias against the Uchiha. The term Cursed Clan was just a label Obirama Senju had popularized. That sentiment had been passed down to Hiruzen Sarutobi and his peers. Obirama's dislike for the Uchiha likely stemmed from his experiences with Madara Uchiha. Madara had left a lasting impression, creating a deep psychological shadow. Obirama feared the emergence of another figure like Madara. The Uchiha's emotional volatility, tied to the activation of their Sharingan, often led to dramatic personality shifts. If another Madara-like figure arose, Hidden Leaf Village might not survive the fallout. Such concerns weren't entirely baseless. It wasn't unreasonable for Obirama to take precautions. Oh, is that so? Orochimaru said, his expression unchanged. Having grown up with Tsunade, he knew her temperament well. Even though she admired Obirama, she hadn't inherited his biases. Still smiling, Orochimaru gave off an air of composure, which made Takuya want to punch him to see if he could knock that smirk off his face. By the way, let me offer you a little insider tip. Takuya said. Go on, Takuya-kun. Orochimaru replied politely. Takuya leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice as he said, due to certain circumstances, Denzo has been secretly imprisoned in a high-security facility. This decision was made without opposition from the Hokage. Denzo. Orochimaru's smile vanished instantly. His pupils narrowed into vertical slits, a telltale sign of his shock. The revelation of Denzo's imprisonment as a high-profile criminal clearly unsettled him. As Denzo's collaborator, Orochimaru knew the consequences if sensitive information were exposed. He, too, could be implicated. Takuya was confident that Denzo would attempt to escape Hidden Leaf Village, and Orochimaru likely felt the same. Orochimaru narrowed his eyes, calculating the potential risks Denzo's escape might pose to him. Takuya added, recently, two unidentified shinobi appeared near Denzo's holding area. Both had cursed seals on their tongues to prevent information leaks. I suspect Denzo has undisclosed underground facilities or research labs outside the village. If these hidden sites are discovered, Denzo will be finished. Oh, that's certainly an intriguing piece of news. Orochimaru said, though a cold gleam flickered in his eyes. Internally, he cursed Denzo. Orochimaru knew exactly where the captured shinobi had come from. Denzo had stationed many operatives in their shared research facilities, despite most of his forces being wiped out in the village. It was clear that Denzo wouldn't quietly serve his sentence. Once Denzo made a move, it would expose their shared secrets. At that point, their partnership would effectively end. Denzo, in his desperation, might destroy evidence of his own wrongdoings. But Orochimaru's involvement? He wouldn't hesitate to throw Orochimaru under the bus. Once Denzo acts, I'll only have two choices. Orochimaru thought grimly. Either admit my guilt or follow him into exile. This information is classified, so don't let it slip. If Tsunade finds out I told you, she'll chew me out. Takuya said, curious about how Orochimaru would respond. Would he continue his alliance with Denzo and leave Hidden Leaf Village together, or would he betray Denzo and distance himself from the fallout? If necessary, Orochimaru could sell out Denzo just as easily as Denzo might sell him out. The question was whether Orochimaru would be willing to leave Hidden Leaf Village in disgrace. Don't worry, Takuya-kun. This will remain between us. Orochimaru said, his faint smile returning. Good. Takuya chuckled. Then I'll leave the Uchiha rotation to you. Let them know when it's time. I'm off for a walk. After Takuya left, Orochimaru's expression darkened. Denzo. He muttered. He realized he couldn't afford to remain passive any longer. Otherwise, Denzo might drag him down with him. Chapter 460, Orochimaru sneaks back to Hidden Leaf Village. Hidden Leaf Village's Root and a darkened snake, neither are good people. The only reason they worked together was mutual benefit. But mutual benefit didn't mean one could casually sell out the other. For Orochimaru, the idea of his hard work being destroyed was utterly unacceptable. It seemed necessary to return to Hidden Leaf Village for a while. Denzo had his own plans, and Orochimaru had his own calculations. So what if it was an underground facility? Denzo had one, and so did Orochimaru. Taking a brief leave wasn't difficult for Orochimaru. He summoned Jiraiya, placed a report on the table, and said, "This is some recent intelligence we've received. Due to the ongoing war, the internal situation in Hidden Mist Village is unstable. The Kaguya and Yuki clans have been stirring up trouble. I hope you can infiltrate the Land of Water, investigate these two bloodline clans, and if possible, not happening." Jiraiya interrupted before Orochimaru could finish. "If you want it done, do it yourself. I'm not interested in this kind of mission." Investigating and collecting information was one thing, but stirring up trouble within the Kaguya and Yuki clans? Orochimaru was giving Jiraiya far too much credit. No way was he taking this mission. Orochimaru glared at him, biting his words. "Fine. Then you manage the camp. I'll personally infiltrate the Land of Water to handle this." "Are you serious?" Jiraiya's eyes widened, his exasperation palpable. "Come on. You're in charge of the camp. If you leave, what am I supposed to do? This kind of mission isn't something you can wrap up in a day or two. If something goes wrong, I'll have no way to explain it to the old man." Jiraiya didn't doubt Orochimaru's intention to infiltrate the Land of Water. Orochimaru had pulled similar stunts countless times before. Even as the frontline commander, he wasn't above sneaking away for intelligence-gathering missions. Ignoring Jiraiya's complaints, Orochimaru said, "I'll be back in 10 days. With White Fang and Takuya here, no matter what Hidden Mist Village tries, they'll be able to handle it." Jiraiya sighed, running his hands through his wild hair in frustration. "Fine, I'll cover for you. Leave a shadow clone behind to handle administrative tasks, and I'll deal with the rest." 10 days wasn't a long time. Given the current state of the war, Hidden Mist Village wouldn't be able to stir up much trouble in such a short period. Plus, with Kakashi Hatake and Takuya at the camp, Jiraiya reluctantly agreed. He knew that even if he refused, Orochimaru would sneak off anyway. Better to have a plan in place than to be blindsided. Orochimaru's departure didn't affect the war effort, but it left Jiraiya buried in work, managing everything in Orochimaru's absence. "Are we really just letting Orochimaru leave like this?" Minato asked, confused by Takuya's indifference to Orochimaru's actions. After all, Orochimaru's departure might allow him to relocate or destroy evidence of his and Denzo's shady dealings. "And what would you suggest?" "Following him?" Takuya replied. "If you try to follow him, he'll notice. Don't underestimate Orochimaru, he's not an easy snake to deal with." Orochimaru's surveillance methods were exceptional. Any disturbance would immediately alert him. Even Takuya wasn't confident he could shadow Orochimaru without being detected. Besides, evidence doesn't matter anymore. From the moment Denzo was imprisoned, everything else became irrelevant. Orochimaru's experiments and schemes were of little concern to Takuya. His sole focus was Denzo. As long as Denzo could be permanently dealt with, everything else was secondary. Orochimaru, unlike Denzo, knew his limits. He wouldn't provoke someone who could crush him. Denzo, on the other hand, constantly courted disaster. As long as Orochimaru managed his research discreetly, whether he left Hidden Leaf Village or not was inconsequential. Meanwhile, Yagura had been traveling covertly, taking circuitous routes back to Hidden Mist Village. Upon his return, he reported everything that had happened in Hidden Leaf Village to his master, which set the assassination plan in motion. A scroll detailing Hidden Mist Village's internal situation was delivered to the front line by the Intelligence Division. To avoid arousing suspicion, Yagura personally ensured the scroll reached the third Mizukage. When the third Mizukage opened the scroll and saw its contents, he erupted in anger. A bunch of useless fools. They can't even handle such a simple matter. The ongoing war had strained Hidden Mist Village's resources, causing financial and logistical issues. The third Mizukage was aware of these problems but dismissed them as inconsequential. As long as Hidden Mist Village and Hidden Leaf Village continued to exhaust each other, his objective was being met. However, with the worsening resource situation threatening the war effort and internal unrest growing, he could no longer ignore the issues. The Kaguya clan, in particular, was becoming increasingly troublesome, plotting to seize territories occupied by other clans. If they acted, the Land of Water could spiral into chaos. Forget continuing the war, Hidden Mist Village might be embroiled in a civil conflict before that. Even Hidden Leaf Village, with its deep reserves, struggled under the war's strain. Hidden Mist Village, isolated and under-resourced, was in no position to endure such challenges. After delegating frontline responsibilities, the third Mizukage hurriedly left for Hidden Mist Village with his guards. Unbeknownst to him, Yagura's operatives had already contacted Kakashi Hatake upon his departure. The opportunity was fleeting. To prevent leaks, Takuya, Tsukumo, and Minato departed immediately without informing Jiraiya. Having conducted numerous reconnaissance missions, Minato had left flying thunder god markers and specialized kunai on many uninhabited islands near the land of water. These served as teleportation points for swift movement. Let's go meet with Yagura. This is our only chance. If we fail, it'll be nearly impossible to corner the third Mizukage again, Takuya said. A failed attempt would only make the third Mizukage more vigilant. Minato placed a hand on Takuya and Tsukumo, teleporting them away from the frontline camp. After 2 swift relocations, they arrived at the rendezvous point with Yagura. Upon arrival, Tsukumo immediately scanned the area for potential threats. Fortunately, Yagura hadn't set a trap. The island was occupied only by Yagura and a few guards. After a brief greeting, Yagura unfurled a map, pointing to a route marked with red lines. The Mizukage-sama is traveling aboard one of our warships. There are our people among his entourage. This is the route they'll take. By tomorrow noon, the ship will pass near this location. Chapter 461, What exactly is Madara Uchiha planning? Yagura, who had spent much of his life patrolling the seas, was well aware of the speed of Hidden Mist Village's warships. As long as nothing unexpected occurred, there wouldn't be any significant deviations in timing. Carefully examining the map, Takuya absent-mindedly twirled a kunai in his hand. Are you certain the route and timing won't be an issue? They won't. Yagura replied firmly. There are people aboard the ship working with us, more than one, in fact. If something unexpected happens, we'll be the first to know. Every village had its own methods for transmitting critical messages. Hidden Leaf Village was no exception, and neither was Hidden Mist Village. Takuya, Tsukumo, and Minato didn't press further. As long as Yagura was confident, that was good enough. The only fear was that the third Mizukage might sense something amiss and change his course at the last minute. Thankfully, water routes were inherently slower than land travel. However, this also meant they were less likely to alter course, a benefit in their current situation. The third Mizukage would never imagine that members of his own village would conspire with outsiders to target and investigate him. There was still plenty of time before the plan would be executed. Takuya momentarily entertained the idea of setting up a small barbecue. Earlier, he'd spotted several large crabs scuttling into a nearby bush. Roasting them might make for a delicious snack. But on second thought, dry rations would suffice. Glancing at Yagura's solemn expression, Takuya figured if he suggested a barbecue, the perpetually youthful-looking Mizukage might snap at him. Speaking of which, Takuya wondered what Yagura's wife looked like. Didn't she mind her husband looking like he'd never grow up? What's wrong? Yagura asked, noticing Takuya staring at his face. His sharp eyebrows furrowed slightly, a hint of offense in his expression. I was just thinking about your whiff. Takuya quickly coughed to cut himself off. Ah, nothing. I was just wondering. Isn't it strange that no one noticed your Mizukage had been under someone's control for all these years? Yagura's face flushed with embarrassment and anger. He wanted nothing more than to kick Takuya. If you know it's an offensive question, why ask? How could I have known the Mizukage was being controlled? Yagura thought to himself bitterly. If not for his increasingly erratic behavior, who would have even suspected? Would you suspect your own third Hokage of being controlled? Sigh, Takuya. Tsukumo smiled dryly, shaking his head as he shot Takuya a disapproving look. Even if you're curious, there are better ways to ask. You're practically jabbing at an open wound. Minato, for his part, didn't know what to say. We never considered it before. Yagura said grimly. It wasn't until the Mizukage began personally leading battles, making reckless decisions that cost the village heavily, that we started to suspect. His behavior had changed since recovering from his illness. For example, he spent hours in the restroom every single day. Despite the awkwardness, Yagura divulged this peculiar detail. There was no mistaking it, this was White Zetsu's doing. Who else would be so fixated on experiencing the sensation of using the restroom? So my previous infiltration wasn't just bad luck, Tsukumo thought, feeling a mixture of relief and frustration. Turns out, I stumbled into the middle of the problem head-on. He finally had an explanation for why he'd encountered the third Mizukage in the bathroom during his infiltration of the Mizukage's office. It wasn't bad luck, the Mizukage's behavior had been unusual all along. Seriously, who spends hours a day in the restroom? Was he sleeping in there? Yagura's face darkened as his expression became more serious. His erratic decisions didn't make sense. Mizukage-sama was someone who had served under both the first and second Mizukages. He was incredibly talented and strong. So, it's not about poor leadership. Takuya interrupted. He was deliberately sending Hidden Mist Village's shinobi to their deaths while dragging Hidden Leaf Village's forces down with him, right? Yagura nodded in agreement. Takuya frowned. It wasn't even time for Madara Uchiha to make his moves yet. What was White Zetsu playing at? Could this be preparation for Kaguya's eventual resurrection? But what was the point? They didn't even have a suitable vessel yet. Draining Hidden Mist Village and Hidden Leaf Village's resources like this seemed pointless. By the time they found a vessel and nurtured it, both villages would have recovered from the war. It didn't make sense. None of it did. There was no reasoning with beings like White Zetsu, whose minds seemed solely preoccupied with strange and trivial obsessions. Maybe this wasn't part of Madara Uchiha's plan at all, Takuya mused. Perhaps White Zetsu and Black Zetsu were simply doing their own thing. After all, in Madara's eyes, the 5 great ninja villages were nothing more than a collective advance. If he were to resurrect, wiping them out would merely require a bit of extra effort. The 5 great nations versus Madara Uchiha. At most, they might manage to tire him out enough to make him sweat a little. It wasn't that Takuya underestimated the 5 great nations or their top-tier shinobi. It was just that Madara's power defied logic. Even if Hashirama Senju were to be revived, it would only delay the inevitable. Without intervention from forces beyond reason, Madara with the Rinnegan was essentially invincible. And those forces? Well, who even knew if young Naruto and Sasuke would exist in this timeline? Hidden Leaf Village's trajectory had already deviated significantly. Sure, Minato's girlfriend was from the Uzumaki clan, but who said their child had to be a son? Why couldn't it be a daughter instead? And besides, Minato hated the name Naruto. Especially Naruto Uzumaki. It made him feel like a curse had been placed on him, as if his son would disown the Namikaze surname. Minato had already sworn he would never name his child Naruto, not even Namikaze Naruto. And what if the reincarnations of Indra and Ashura's chakra manifested as sisters this time? Sasuke Uchiha's a girl? Itachi going from an overprotective brother to an overprotective sister? The mere thought sent shivers down Takuya's spine. He couldn't unsee it. What are you thinking about? Minato asked, nudging Takuya out of his thoughts. Yagura had left to set up surveillance around the island, ensuring no one would approach by accident. Nothing. Takuya replied, shaking off his strange musings. I was just thinking about Naruto. Minato's face darkened as he snapped, get lost. I, Minato Namikaze, will never become a live-in son-in-law. And my child will never be named Naruto. Never. What if it's a daughter? Minato hesitated, his anger dissipating slightly. The idea of having a daughter, someone sweet and adorable, was surprisingly appealing. Hopeless, Takuya thought, his expression turning wry. Was Minato really on the path to becoming a doting father to a daughter? A daughter-obsessed Minato and an Itachi-level sister-obsessed Sasuke. What a terrifying thought. Chapter 462, I, Yagami Takuya, am ordered to assassinate you. The idea of a small barbecue ultimately didn't materialize. Takuya wasn't someone who acted recklessly, the priority right now was the mission. Once the mission was completed and they returned to Hidden Leaf Village, he could eat as much barbecue as he wanted. For now, everyone was conserving their strength, waiting for the target to arrive. The 3rd Mizukage didn't disappoint. As per the anticipated route, his ship steadily approached the edge of the small island. Watching the tiny black dot on the horizon gradually draw closer, Yagura felt a twinge of nervousness. Whether they could change the current situation in the village hinged on the success of this assassination attempt. This joint assassination wasn't intended to outright kill the 3rd Mizukage but to expose his secrets. If it was confirmed that he was indeed under someone's control, killing him would be justified. Takuya and Sakamo were tasked with taking the lead, while Yagura and Minato stayed hidden on the island, waiting to make their move once everything became clear. Will you go, or should I? Takuya drew his Kusanagi sword as Sakamo gestured for him to go first. Leave this kind of head-on confrontation to the younger generation. Sakamo said with a smirk. Us older folks are better suited for sneak attacks. Cunning old fox. Engaging directly carried risks, but Takuya didn't refuse. If Sakamo wanted to focus on sneak attacks, he was free to do so. As the ship drew closer to the island, the 3rd Mizukage rested inside while several Hidden Mist Village shinobi stood guard on the deck, keeping watch for potential threats. Whether due to Yagura and Genji's planning or the 3rd Mizukage's negligence, the ship lacked any sensory ninja. This allowed the ship to approach the island without noticing the people lying in wait. What's that? Following its route, the ship passed by the side of the uninhabited island. Such small, uninhabited islands were plentiful in the seas surrounding the land of water and rarely drew much attention. But suddenly, a terrifying chakra presence emanated from the island, accompanied by a brilliant flash of lightning. The shinobi on deck immediately sensed something was amiss. Trouble? One of them sounded the alarm, prompting the others to become vigilant and focus their attention on the distant island. In the next instant, their hearts sank as they saw a glowing sphere of lightning hurtling directly toward the ship. Enemy attack. Even in the relative safety of their rear position, the Hidden Mist Village shinobi quickly understood the gravity of the situation. Someone was trying to assassinate the third Mizukage. The shout startled the resting Mizukage in the cabin. The shinobi on the deck instinctively launched counterattacks, trying to intercept the lightning sphere. But they overestimated their abilities and underestimated the power of Takuya's specially prepared lightning bomb. This wasn't an ordinary explosive, its speed and destructive force were far beyond what they could handle. Had they reacted instantly, they might have had a chance to intercept it. But their slight delay made it impossible. Boom. As expected, the lightning bomb struck the ship with a deafening explosion. The massive vessel was blown apart, sending splinters of wood, seawater, and even unlucky fish and shrimp flying into the air. The sea erupted into a towering column of water before waves rolled outward in every direction. Using water style to block a lightning bomb? Truly a genius move. Takuya silently applauded the unfortunate shinobi. Their first instinct should have been to abandon ship and flee, yet they had tried to counter the lightning bomb with water style. Did they think using water style automatically made them as powerful as Tobirama Senju? Takuya wasn't sure if the shinobi had survived, but the third Mizukage, who had been resting in the cabin, managed to escape. What a miserable sight. The Mizukage had nearly been reduced to a lone survivor by a single lightning bomb. Standing on the water with a dark expression, accompanied by two panicked bodyguards, the Mizukage confirmed what Takuya suspected: the guards on the deck were gone. From their vantage point, Minato whispered to Yagura, "Are all your hidden mist village shinobi this brave? Using water style against Takuya's lightning bomb?" This was the same technique that had left even Henzo the salamander utterly helpless. And they thought water style would work? Impressive. Enough already. Yagura's youthful face flushed with embarrassment. He internally cursed the fools on the ship countless times. Using water style against a lightning bomb? Why not try blocking a tailed beast bomb with earth style while they were at it? Of course, such ridiculous scenes weren't unheard of. During the Fourth Great Ninja War, large-scale earth-style techniques were indeed used to block a tailed beast bomb, with predictably disastrous results. Sometimes, you don't know the true meaning of despair until you've tried something and failed miserably. Having struck the first blow, Takuya had no intention of hiding. Resting the Kusanagi sword casually on his shoulder, he began walking toward the third Mizukage. "Yagami Takuya, how dare you attack the Mizukage-sama?" The two remaining bodyguards were both furious and alarmed. They had expected a smooth journey back to Hidden Mist Village, only to be ambushed halfway by none other than Hidden Leaf Village's rising star, Yagami Takuya. "How dare I?" Takuya smirked as if he'd just heard a joke. "Hidden Mist Village and Hidden Leaf Village are at war. We're enemies. I, Yagami Takuya, was ordered to assassinate the third Mizukage. So what? Is there some rule in the ninja world that says we can't assassinate the leader of an enemy village? Is there?" The bodyguards were furious but found themselves at a loss for words. Because, indeed, there was no such rule. In fact, assassinating the leader of an enemy village was a standard strategy in war. This is bad. While the bodyguards fumed, the third Mizukage wasn't thinking about fighting Takuya head-on. Instead, his priority was finding a way to escape. He had no intention of engaging in battle here. With Black Zetsu's intelligence, the third Mizukage was well aware of Takuya's strength, far beyond his ability to handle. Moreover, if he fought with his full strength, the truth would come to light. By tomorrow, everyone would know that the third Mizukage was under someone's control, and that this person could use wood style. There was no way to win. Fighting would only expose him further. Escaping was the only viable option. Wait. Something feels off. Wasn't White Zetsu supposed to gloat and taunt his opponents at a time like this? Why was the third Mizukage silent, his eyes darting around as if plotting an escape? Takuya sighed. If White Zetsu wasn't going to play along, he'd have no choice but to send him on his way. "Mizukage-sama, retreat." Seeing Takuya lower the Kusanagi sword from his shoulder, the bodyguards felt a chill run down their spines. They immediately drew their own blades and rushed forward, trying to buy time for the Mizukage to escape. Lightning style, thunder flash. Takuya wasn't in the mood to toy with them. In a flash of lightning, he darted past the two bodyguards. The bodyguards froze mid-step, their bodies rigid as their pupils dilated. The swords they had drawn slipped from their lifeless hands. PFFT, blood sprayed into the air. Chapter 463, The Dignified Third Mizukage Using Wood Style? The throat, partially severed and charred, sprayed a torrent of fresh blood, dyeing the seawater beneath red. Two corpses fell into the sea, yet Takuya didn't slow down, rushing straight toward the third Mizukage. In just one move. To be precise, Takuya's target was never the two shinobi he had passed. Their deaths were merely incidental. This scene made the third Mizukage's eyelid twitch uncontrollably. At this moment, he could no longer remain composed and shouted loudly, "Yagami Takuya, You dare to assassinate me? Aren't you afraid this will lead to an all-out war between Hidden Mist Village and Hidden Leaf Village? Ice Style, Ice Crystal Jutsu. Despite his verbal threats, the third Mizukage's hands moved swiftly, unleashing a powerful Ice Style Jutsu that surged toward Takuya. The third Mizukage's Ice Style was formidable. Unlike the Yuki clan's Ice Style, his techniques were far more intricate and terrifying in combat. The Yuki clan could only crudely shape ice for defensive or evasive purposes. Countless icy crystals formed from seawater, closing in to entrap Takuya in a frozen prison. Unfortunately for the Mizukage, a brilliant flash of violet blue light shattered the ice crystals, allowing Takuya to break free. Such a minor ice technique was incapable of restraining him. Damn it! The third Mizukage cursed under his breath, his hands moving even faster. Ice Style, Freezing Jutsu. Centered on the Mizukage, the seawater around him froze rapidly. A thick layer of ice formed over the ocean's surface with a loud cracking sound. The ice seemed like a giant hand, gripping Takuya's feet tightly and continuously restricting his movements. Is this really just Ice Style? Minato's eyes widened in astonishment. Even Yagura and the others couldn't help but gasp. They knew their Mizukage's strength was immense and that his mastery of Ice Style was extraordinary. However, they hadn't seen him fight in a long time. And this Ice Style was entirely beyond their expectations. Compared to the Yuki clan's techniques, the third Mizukage's Ice Style was on a completely different level. No wonder Takuya sought to fuse Ice Style into his abilities, claiming it had enormous potential for growth. Minato recalled Takuya's fascination with Ice Style, a bloodline limit he had been experimenting with for some time, but he hadn't paid it much mind. The Yuki clan's Ice Style gave the impression of mediocrity, leading him to underestimate it. But now, it was clear, the fault didn't lie with Ice Style itself but with the clan's inability to utilize it effectively. It was akin to the stark difference between Dobirama Senju's water style and that of other shinobi. The same technique could yield vastly different results depending on the user. Fighting on the ocean really has its limitations. Will this old guy freeze the entire scene next? Takuya glanced at the rapidly freezing surface, the ice layer continuously restricting his speed. He couldn't help but feel a hint of envy. He had always suspected Ice Style wasn't as weak as the Yuki clan made it seem. Compared to other bloodline limits, the third Mizukage's control over Ice Style was far more dominant and precise. Its immense power aside, even the ground one stood on could become a trap to restrict movement, a truly terrifying ability. Unless one could avoid touching the ice entirely or had the ability to fly, escape was nearly impossible. Jiraiya-sensei would probably find Ice Style fascinating. I'll share the details of this battle with him once I return. Minato believed that if Takuya showed an interest in mastering Ice Style, he would undoubtedly find a way to do so. If Takuya could master it, others could as well. It was merely a matter of talent. Much like Hidden Stone's Village's particle style. Take this big dumpling of mine. Since his movements were restricted, Takuya abandoned his speed-based attacks and opted for an explosive technique instead. Again with his move. Takuya's blatant disregard for tactics as he hurled his thunder explosive ball made the third Mizukage feel utterly exasperated. Didn't you come to cut me down? Then come at me with your blade. Why are you throwing explosives? Youngsters these days have no sense of honor. Though mentally cursing, the third Mizukage quickly performed another jutsu to counter the attack, Ice Style, Ice Vibration Jutsu. A large ice wall rose in front of the Mizukage. As the thunder explosive ball collided with the ice, the layers vibrated and shattered one after another, ultimately dispersing the explosion's force. The Mizukage managed to retreat unscathed. Not bad. Takuya's eyes lit up in admiration. He had always believed that every bloodline limit possessed incredible potential, its upper limits were only constrained by its user's imagination and skill. The Yuki clan's Ice Style was so rudimentary that Takuya was embarrassed to even call it Ice Style. Compared to the third Mizukage's techniques, the Yuki clan wasn't even worthy of carrying his sandals. It was no wonder the Mizukage had always dismissed the Yuki clan as insignificant. Sitting on a treasure trove but failing to utilize it, who could they blame but themselves? The mission was nearly complete. Noticing that Kakashi Hatake was in position, Takuya decided to stop pursuing the Mizukage and continued his dishonorable tactic of throwing explosives. The Mizukage, who had just planned his escape, had no choice but to use the Ice Vibration Jutsu to block again. After successfully defending against the explosion, the Mizukage let out a sigh of relief. But just then, a chilling killing intent locked onto him. Not good. The Mizukage's heart sank. Does Yagami Takuya have accomplices? Damn it. Having just used a jutsu to block Takuya's attack, the Mizukage was in a brief moment of vulnerability when a lightning-fast figure charged toward him. The figure wielded a blade enveloped in crackling lightning, slashing directly at the Mizukage's neck. The Mizukage didn't need to look to know who it was. After all, he had once fled in sheer panic from this man, holding up his pants as he ran. Although it had been a moment of confusion, the memory of that humiliation remained vivid. The man who had brought him such disgrace had returned. Get lost. Dense spikes erupted from the Mizukage's back, growing rapidly to impale Kakashi Hatake as he attacked from behind. Danger. Tsukumo swiftly severed the spikes aimed at him and retreated, his eyes filled with shock. This is wood style? As a Hidden Leaf Village shinobi, Tsukumo recognized wood style immediately, even though it was rarely seen in Hidden Leaf Village anymore. Wood style was practically a symbol of Hidden Leaf Village's heritage. Yet now, this technique had appeared on an enemy. The revelation left everyone stunned, except for Takuya, who had anticipated it. Even Yagura, who had devised the assassination plan, hadn't expected their Mizukage to resort to using wood style in desperation. Wood style, piercing roots jutsu. Takuya sheathed his Kusanagi sword, his gaze mocking as he studied the Mizukage. I'm curious. Why would the dignified third Mizukage of Hidden Mist Village, a master of ice style, suddenly use wood style? Could it be you're the first Hokage's son? No, that's not right. The first Hokage wouldn't have a son as old as you. Tsukumo's mouth twitched. He felt the need to secure Hashirama Senju's coffin lid before the legendary ninja returned to life from sheer outrage. The spikes receded into the Mizukage's body, and his demeanor suddenly shifted. He scratched his head awkwardly and said with a sheepish smile, well, you've found me out. That's troublesome. The serious and stern third Mizukage abruptly transformed into a goofball. He didn't seem to mind his change in demeanor, instead grinning at Takuya. No wonder you're hailed as a genius comparable to the god of shinobi. I underestimated you, just like everyone else. What kind of madness is this? Takuya admitted he couldn't handle this comedic side of the Mizukage. Fortunately, his mission was now complete. Chapter 464, The Allure of KK Genkai. The moment the wood style, piercing roots jutsu was revealed, it became evident that the third Mizukage was indeed being controlled. As for who was controlling him? That wasn't Takuya's concern. That was Hidden Mist Village's internal issue. As for whether Yagura could take down the third Mizukage, Takuya felt it was unlikely. Yagura wasn't strong enough yet. His power would only soar after becoming a Jinchuriki. Unfortunately, even as a Jinchuriki, he wouldn't stand a chance against a Mangekyo Sharingan. A naturally ill-fated individual. Who are you, and why are you controlling our Mizukage? With the situation clear, Yagura had no reason to continue hiding. He stepped out from the small island with his team, surrounding the third Mizukage along with several guards. It was obvious Yagura and his team were furious. Their Mizukage had been controlled, initiating an inexplicable war that cost many lives in their village. Anyone in their position would feel enraged. That Yagura refrained from cursing outright was already commendable. What now? Should we help? Tsukumo Hatake and Minato approached Takuya, silently asking for his opinion. Both were curious about the third Mizukage, wanting to know his true identity, or more precisely, who was controlling him. Help with what? Our mission is already complete. The alliance between the two villages didn't include aiding Hidden Mist Village in taking down the third Mizukage. Their task was only to assassinate and expose the Mizukage's secret. Whether Hidden Mist Village could capture him or not was their own business. Oh, it's little Yagura. I must thank you for your help over the years. The third Mizukage maintained his comedic demeanor, his words infuriating Yagura to the point that veins bulged on his forehead. This was clearly mockery. Thank you for assisting me all these years in cleaning up some troublesome people. If this wasn't mockery, what was? Yagura had believed he was following the true third Mizukage, helping him eliminate many threats over the years. Only to discover that the Mizukage he had been loyally serving was a fraud. The bitter realization must have been unbearable. Die. Enraged, Yagura charged forward with his weapon, ignoring the disparity in their strength. But no matter how much Yagura wanted to fight, the third Mizukage had no such interest. Letting out a sly laugh, his body plunged into the seawater. Stop him. Yagura roared, and his guards immediately sprang into action. Let them handle it. Takuya had no intention of intervening. This was Hidden Mist Village's internal matter. There was no need for outsiders to interfere, especially when Hidden Mist Village hadn't offered any benefits for their assistance in capturing the third Mizukage. Besides, there's no way we could chase down someone skilled in water style, ice style, and even wood style, let alone someone with an unknown origin. Good point. Tsukumo Hatake nodded in agreement. A figure this dangerous was best left alone. Hidden Mist Village's internal affairs were better resolved by their own people. Wood style. Minato mused. I didn't expect the mysterious person controlling and replacing the third Mizukage to wield wood style. Not just wood style. That person knows far more than that. Finding a clean spot, Takuya sat down. The ice was slippery and uncomfortably cold, but it sufficed. The three waited in silence. Before long, Yagura and his team returned, their expressions grim, an obvious sign that their pursuit had failed. Yagura couldn't blame Takuya's group for not helping in the chase. After all, their cooperation was temporary, not a close alliance. Expecting Takuya's team, who weren't proficient in water style, to dive into the sea after the third Mizukage would have been unreasonable. Since our cooperation has concluded, we'll take our leave. I hope your village can halt the war soon and initiate peace talks. That will be done. Though burning with frustration over the failed pursuit, Yagura knew better than to vent it on Takuya. Doing so would only backfire on him. Once I return to the village, I'll personally report to Master Genji. With him involved, the war will end swiftly. You can be assured of that. We deeply appreciate the assistance of you and your village. Pausing for a moment, Yagura continued, but regarding the sword, Seimata. Negotiations were still necessary. Though Tsunade had already agreed to return Seimata to Hidden Mist Village, acquiring the weapon required Takuya's cooperation. Yagura wasn't naive enough to believe Takuya had no say in the matter. After his trip to Hidden Leaf Village, Yagura understood one thing: while Tsunade held power, she and Takuya were tightly aligned. To offend one was to offend both. I need 2 members of the Yuki clan. Preferably ones who have awakened their Kekkei Genkai. Strength isn't important, as long as they're delivered to me, the weapon will be returned. It wasn't a condition Takuya had initially considered, but better late than never. The Yuki clan had been increasingly defiant. With Yagura's ruthless methods, he certainly wouldn't mind wiping them out entirely. The same logic applied to the Kaguya clan. Takuya's request for 2 Yuki clan members wasn't something Yagura would refuse. In his view, Seimata was far more valuable than any members of the Yuki clan. As for what Takuya intended to do with them, it wasn't hard to guess: it had to be for ice style. Agreed. Without hesitation, Yagura consented. With that, the discussion concluded, and the 2 parties went their separate ways. Minato used his abilities to transport Takuya and Tsukumo Hatake away. Back at their camp, Tsukumo Hatake looked at Takuya curiously. You want members of the Yuki clan for their ice style? Having anticipated the question, Takuya didn't hide his intentions. He had begun researching ice style long ago, though his progress had stalled. Smiling, Takuya nodded. Yes. I've been studying it for a while, but I've hit a bottleneck. I want to use the Yuki clan members to experiment further. Theoretically, ice style is a Kekkei Genkai formed by combining water style and wind style. Without the bloodline, it's difficult to achieve the fusion. Young people these days are truly bold. I hope you succeed. Tsukumo Hatake chuckled, patting Takuya on the shoulder before leaving. He had no doubt about Takuya's ability to master ice style. Experimentation was always worthwhile. If successful, his son Kakashi would directly benefit. Though Tsukumo had slain countless Kekkei Genkai users with his white fang blade, he couldn't deny the immense potential of Kekkei Genkai. Sadly, the Hatake clan, with its roots in a samurai lineage, had no connection to such abilities. Chapter 465, A Secret Deal with Orochimaru. To gain a Kekkei Genkai, there are usually only 2 paths: inheritance through bloodline or combining different chakra natures. The former depends on ancestry, while the latter requires effort and talent. If Takuya mastered ice style, he wouldn't keep it to himself. Teaching Kakashi would be inevitable. Who knows? Kakashi might even grasp it himself. Tsukumo Hatake had faith in his son's potential. Maybe I could collaborate with Orochimaru on this. As long as Orochimaru didn't cause trouble, Takuya wouldn't mind working with him. As long as it didn't involve forbidden experiments, everything else was negotiable. Most importantly, Takuya wasn't afraid of Orochimaru turning on him. First, his research wasn't taboo, it could even be conducted openly. Second, he had the funds to support it. Unlike Denzo, who scraped together resources by misappropriating village funds, Takuya didn't have to worry about finances. And most crucially, Takuya didn't lack support. If he were transparent about his intentions, he was confident Tsunade would permit it, and Kushina would happily fund it. Ah, the joys of wealth. Thinking about how Orochimaru and Denzo scrambled for money while he had plenty to spare, Takuya felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Minato looked at him, puzzled, his face full of question marks. What's with you suddenly saying something so random? I know you're wealthy, but what's your point? You rest for a bit. I'm going to check in with Orochimaru, and then we'll return to Hidden Leaf Village. Parting ways with Minato, Takuya headed to the command center. Jiraiya wasn't there, and the person inside wasn't a shadow clone, it was Orochimaru himself. It seemed Orochimaru had already dealt with his and Denzo's shady affairs. Have the assets been relocated? Relocated? Takuya's abrupt question almost caused Orochimaru to reveal too much. Quickly catching himself, Orochimaru's smile froze for a few seconds before returning to normal. I don't understand what you're talking about, Takuya-kun. No, you understand. Takuya sat down across from him without hesitation, tapping the table meaningfully. Denzo is going to die. If you want to cut ties, now is the time. As long as you don't threaten me or Tsunade, I don't care what you do. Oh, by the way, the war is likely to end soon. The third Mizukage turned out to be a fraud, and he knows wood style, no less. In less than a minute, Orochimaru's smile froze twice. The first time was when Takuya exposed his and Denzo's experiments. The second was when he learned that the third Mizukage could use wood style. It was obvious the third Mizukage was a fraud, otherwise, Hidden Leaf Village wouldn't have collaborated with Hidden Mist Village on such a grand deception. But what caught Orochimaru off guard was the revelation that the third Mizukage could use wood style. After all, wasn't the core of his and Denzo's research focused on wood style? Despite some progress and even a few surviving test subjects, they were still just experiments. Whether those subjects could grow into anything significant remained uncertain. Yet here was Takuya, casually informing him that the third Mizukage already wielded wood style. How could Orochimaru possibly accept this? I've risked everything to collaborate with that meddlesome Denzo, pouring countless resources and effort into this research, and there's still no substantial result. And now you're telling me the third Mizukage already has wood style? From the lack of expression on Orochimaru's face and the sharp narrowing of his pupils, it was clear he was deeply unsettled. Unbothered, Takuya poured himself a cup of tea and took a sip, waiting for Orochimaru to process the information. After a while, Orochimaru finally regained his composure. That is quite an unexpected revelation. He licked his lips with his long tongue. You and Denzo were researching wood style, weren't you? Takuya threw out another bombshell. Here we go again. The smile Orochimaru had just managed to regain vanished in an instant. He almost lashed out but restrained himself, forcing a stiff smile as he looked at Takuya with eyes full of veiled menace. Takuya-kun, you must be joking. How could I possibly? Don't deny it. Takuya's gaze sharpened. I know exactly what you're up to. I just don't want to get involved. Even if it were exposed, Denzo wouldn't face any real consequences. Hiruzen Sarutobi wouldn't allow it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gone to such lengths to get him imprisoned in the first place. Besides, placing the teacup lightly on the table, Takuya smiled faintly. Don't give me that dangerous snake-eyed glare, or you'll regret it. Orochimaru's mind churned with a storm of thoughts as he stared silently at Takuya. The threatening aura dissipated, he genuinely didn't dare act rashly. If it came to a fight, he knew he would lose. What do you want? Talking to someone smart had its advantages. Takuya snapped his fingers. Hand over the surviving test subject from your experiments. Erase your traces and prepare all the evidence against Denzo. I want to crush him. After the war ends, I have some projects I want to collaborate on with you. He wanted the experimental subject and the evidence to destroy Denzo. This indicated that Takuya wasn't targeting Orochimaru. In fact, he was offering to clear his name. Don't get any ideas. The fact that I know this much means I know a lot more, including why the third Mizukage can use wood style. I also hope that when Denzo escapes prison, your name isn't on my hit list. Otherwise, you know the consequences. I know you're good at running and hiding, but Manda has been with me for years, it wasn't for nothing. All this information, you'd share it with me? Orochimaru ignored the other threats, focusing entirely on the reason behind the third Mizukage's wood style. His gleaming eyes betrayed his intense interest. That depends on your performance. When I return to the village, send over the experimental subject. I want to see your sincerity. With that, Takuya left the command center, leaving Orochimaru with an increasingly amused expression. Wood style and the fraudulent third Mizukage. Things were getting more and more interesting. Perhaps he could uncover his own path to immortality from all this. Compared to Takuya's terms, Denzo was nothing but a pile of garbage. Even the allure of Hashirama cells couldn't captivate Orochimaru anymore, he wanted more. If Denzo no longer had anything Orochimaru needed, he would sell him out in a heartbeat. They were both ruthless and willing to do anything for their goals. Loyalty was unnecessary. Meanwhile, at the Sarutobi compound, the third Hokage frowned as he looked at his guest. Takeshi, Tsunade has made it clear that she doesn't want me involved in Denzo's affairs. I admit Denzo has gone too far. The clan leader of the Shimura clan, Takeshi Shimura, smiled bitterly. Hokage-sama, while it's true that Denzo-sama has made mistakes, keeping him in a maximum security cell, forced to eat, drink, and sleep there, could damage the village's reputation if word gets out. Many in the clan are already discussing it. As clan leader, I'm in an awkward position. I came here today not to argue but to ask Hokage-sama, for the sake of past ties, to help Denzo-sama just this once. Chapter 466, Want to renovate a prison cell? Then pay for it yourself. The Shimura clan has only this one small request. Takeshi Shimura said with a deep bow toward the third Hokage, his gesture leaving the older man unable to voice his objections. In Hidden Leaf Village, the Shimura clan was considered a prominent family, and much of its development could be attributed to Denzo. Despite the trouble he had caused the clan, many in the Shimura family had benefited from his influence. Now that Denzo had fallen from grace, these individuals wanted to secure some small comforts for him.